This is great. Everybody do an Al Pacino impression. Shit.
Whoa!
Michael, do you have an Al Pacino impression?
I don't think so. But was that an Al Pacino impression?
She,
Is that what I'm going off of?
It's all about going down to like just a lower octave. You got to get some grumble in your voice. Okay. I don't know. Favorite Al Pacino
she's
movie?
got a great ass.
Well,
That's pretty good.
I do like him making Chris O'Donnell cry.
Yeah.
So maybe Son of a Woman. That can't be the
Okay.
best movie he's in, though. Best scene.
Any
maybe.
Given Sunday is a classic.
What's wrong with Chris O'Donnell?
He was
There's
Robin.
nothing wrong with him. I just think he's a great crying figure.
Was Chris O'Donnell Chris Evans before Chris Evans?
No.
And
That's,
I don't mean like, obviously Chris Evans is
Chris Evans is overrated.
bigger. What?
Yeah.
I've been on the Chris Evans train since Cellular.
He does
Cellular is an underrated, just like random.
He does a good job.
Thriller.
At
Do you
playing-
like Cellular? You don't like Cellular, do you?
I don't know what that is.
Really?
No.
So this was
Does
back.
it have Jessica Alba in it? Because it sounds like
no,
a Jessica
it's
Alba movie.
him and Kim Basinger, and Jason Statham plays the villain. Who is the girl? I can't remember who the girl. Well, I guess it's just Kim Basinger. So this was like early 2000s, like flip phone days, and the whole premise. It's similar to Phone Booth, except he's on the run and he has to hold the cell phone because he's trying to. He just gets a random call from a lady who's been kidnapped. So he's on the phone with this person trying to get to her. And it's actually like, it's exactly what it sounds like, just like what it's almost a B-level thriller, but it's actually a fun movie to watch.
Wasn't there a Halle Berry movie just like that?
Yes. What
Is
was
there
that?
really?
Yeah, it came out like 3 years ago.
Swordfish. I've never seen
Brad
that movie.
Anderson directed it.
I've really never seen Swordfish.
It's just called like Kidnap or
Right.
Kidnapped or something like
Wait,
that.
is this a Halle Berry movie that came out recently?
Yeah, it
You
was like
just said?
3 years ago.
Yeah, something like that.
It's crazy. I feel like Halle Berry is somebody who pops up in movies like late. She doesn't do a lot of movies, does she? Recently?
What was the last movie she did? I really can't remember.
Wide release.
Kingsman.
Yeah.
Kingsman: The Golden Circle.
Oh yeah,
maybe.
that's right. Yeah, she's usually always housed as like not housed. She's usually always stuck in a corner doing that other like she's just some character off in the side that you're like, oh shit, it's Halle Berry.
Maybe one of the most overrated Oscar winners ever. Not that she didn't deserve it at the time, but when you look at her career, it's like, how did you ever win an Oscar? When you look at everything else.
But to be fair, that's probably a lot of Oscar winners.
I feel like a lot of people are like that.
Yeah, but I don't know.
What's that guy's name that was in the guy from Kick-Ass? Quicksilver?
Aaron Taylor Johnson?
Did he win an Oscar? Was that an Oscar or a Golden Globe?
What?
Either
Or
way.
Nocturnal Animals?
That was a Globe, yeah.
It was a Globe. Okay.
So what's worse? Like, what's worse? If Halle Berry wins that Oscar and just kind of like never does anything again, or does a lot of nothing roles? Because I'm sure there are a lot of actors so you could throw out there and you'd surprise me and say that person won an Oscar, because I'd be like, I don't even know who that is.
I don't
But
think
Halle
it's the
Berry
Oscar,
just
though.
does a lot of things. Like, we couldn't even remember the last thing she did.
It's not the Oscar, I think, that will shelve somebody's career, right? Because the Oscar doesn't really do shit. It's just an achievement, right? So I look at people like Mike Myers. Mike Myers?
Mike Myers.
Not the one with not the William Shatner face, but Austin Powers. He made his money off Shrek and Austin Powers, and just like, I'm only gonna work when I want to. Right? I mean,
I think the Love Guru kind of put a kibosh to that.
I mean, he's so fucking filthy rich. He can do what he wants right now.
Those
Are you?
pretty strong words from a man that was defending Cellular, which was saying like, "Hey, Avengers: Infinity War. Let's
is
talk
he
about
rich?
this
I think
cell
you
phone
would-
thriller."
I think you would like Cellular. It's
you know how much
dated.
Shrek
I don't know how
made?
to take that. Really,
It's dated.
I-
I mean, it's just a fun movie to kind of sit back and watch. It's dated is its only problem. Cellular also came out. Do you remember Paparazzi?
Is that the Mel Gibson produced movie?
Yeah, and the main character is the villain of Too Fast, Too Furious. I don't know whatever happened to that actor.
Is he also on like Pitch
no idea.
Black? I feel like he was like
Maybe.
generic
He's
action,
probably like
action guy.
There was a group of guys like who was the villain in Blade? Who he was also on Prison Break. there's a lot of like those random guys. That
Blade or
had
Blade
those,
1?
They always had those roles. I think it might have been.
Steven
Maybe it was
Dorff.
Blade. Maybe it was Trinity.
Stephen
actually.
Dorff.
That's the only.
Stephen Dorff is another
Yeah.
example
Yeah.
of that. Yeah.
I mean, Stephen Dorff was a villain in Blade 2.
Oh, that's right. So it was either Blade or Blade Trinity, that the guy from Prison Break. But Underworld there's those guys that always kind of circle those same roles. That's what that random guy reminded me of.
You're saying that's what Halle Berry is basically now?
We're trying to bring it back to Halle Berry.
For comedic purposes, yes. And this all stemmed from Chris O'Donnell.
I got to go back to Mike Myers.
Why?
You were questioning whether or not he was filthy rich.
I just don't know how rich he is.
The Shrek movies made so much money that
Okay.
Eddie Murphy is. Eddie Murphy made a lot of money anyways, but that donkey money on top, just sprinkled on top of the rest of his career, he can just hang out and not do stand-up comedy and pick up all the,
even if he wanted
cross-dressing
to, I don't
hookers
think
he wants
anybody
to.
would let him.
Why?
I think the world's done with Eddie Murphy.
Why?
I just do.
I mean, in the comedy community, he's renowned as one of the greatest comics ever lived.
Right.
And
for things that he did in the 80s.
Right, but people still want him to make comedy. There's still like a outcry from at least his community.
Well,
to
in the same
continue to
way
make
that
comedy.
comics are still heartbroken over what happened to Bill Cosby.
I knew it was coming. I was like, should I be the one to bring up Bill Cosby? No.
You can do it.
I mean,
I just
let's
brought up
talk
Bill.
about
I
it.
just brought up Bill Cosby on Friday
So-
when I was
so
talking about Kanye West.
how do you feel about?
Did you say what's bad about him? To me?
No. I just said let's talk
Oh,
about
okay.
it. Oh my
I
god.
thought you were saying what's bad about him. I'm
No,
like,
no,
that's
no.
a bold question.
So
That's what Kanye West said like a year ago. I'm serious.
Listen,
That's what I said on my podcast. I was like, the stuff that Kanye's doing now should be of no surprise to anybody, considering before his last album came out, he tweeted just out of nowhere, Bill Cosby is innocent,
Yeah.
and just left it there.
what was your? Did you have a connection to Bill Cosby growing up?
Not especially. I didn't watch like the Cosby Show, other than catching an episode like in syndication or something.
I thought
Right.
you were going to forget the name of the show for a second.
Did he have two? I felt like, was there another
So
one
he
that was
had-
like an alternate?
He had the Cosby Show, and then Cosby, and then
Jello
Cos.
pudding.
Seriously, there was three. I didn't know that.
Cosby Show, or Cosby
Ghost
Show,
Dad.
Cosby, and Cos.
Ghost Dad, I remember not liking as a child. So
I know, right?
I liked Bill Cosby himself. I think that was probably one of his more famous specials.
Okay.
And it would be hard to watch that now. I think that came up on the Colbert Show, I think, or like his late show with Seinfeld. They had a disagreement on that. And Seinfeld's stance was he could still separate the man.
I think he
from
said
his
that
work.
about Louis too. I think Seinfeld is, which I mean that is an interesting
Do
conversation.
you really have to separate Louis from his work, since a lot of the stuff that he was accused of is in his work? Like,
Well, I
know,
mean,
right?
we
Not
are.
only was it in his
we
work,
are,
he literally portrayed it in his show in an episode.
whereas Cosby was America's dad.
Well, I
in
would
the 80s.
also argue, and people might not be thrilled with this idea, but I would argue that there's also just different levels to what both individuals did.
Yeah, I mean, there's never been a more interesting time to separate art from artists than there is today. Regardless of what pop culture sort of lane you fall in, it's music, movies.
But the difference with
Television.
comedy, like when we talk
Comedy.
about like the band Brand New, I don't know if you listen to Brand New or not. But
No,
the band
I'm
Brand
the
New,
old guy.
It's okay.
Are they young? Are they hip?
No,
like
they're
'em.
definitely
No.
not. They're probably they were really big. I mean, they're still technically really big, but they were huge when I was in high school. I graduated in 2005, and they're just kind of this niche underground band with this really hardcore following, like a super loyal following. And they just randomly dropped their album, latest album, as a surprise, and it went to number 1, and people were like, "This is crazy. This band is doing that. Why are you freaking out?"
because I can barely see you.
Well, that's okay. We got loud over here, and then now we're talking right here. It's okay. Don't worry about it. So, anyways, this
Can't edit it.
we can edit it. This band, they went to number 1. People were excited, and then all of a sudden, all this stuff came out, sexual misconduct things
With the
from-
lead singer.
with the lead singer from his past, and he owned up to it. And
So when we talk about like when we find out actors that are in movies like Kevin Spacey or Louis, the difference when we talk about musicians and a stand-up, for example, is we can justify, well, all of these other people worked on this movie and we can still enjoy this movie but when you talk about stand-up, it's a little bit different.
Right.
Of course, I guess stand-up comedians are in movies and then you could talk about that, but you mentioned like certain comedians specials and it's like, I mean, that's all them. And that's what I think is interesting about what Jerry Seinfeld is saying, is that he's somehow able to separate a project that's all one person's work. And I don't know if I'm on board with that idea yet, but
he's coming at it from a different perspective. Like he's coming at it
for sure.
from the same profession. So when he's watching a comedian, he's looking at like sort of their approach to the material with that sort of distance. I don't know if you can have that expectation from just a consumer, a general consumer, to be like, oh, Bill Cosby's telling me about his problems with his wife and his children.
Yeah.
And then here's a man who did other things, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's probably different too. If you, like, I'm not a stand-up comedian. I don't know if maybe
I am.
Okay. Allegedly. No, you're not. In fact, somebody who was a comedian told you to not do comedy there. I don't know what that was about. That was very strange.
Why did you bring that up?
I don't know.
Can I hear this story? Why would a comedian just randomly tell you to not
Which is
do
weird
this?
because you have told me that I should try it.
Well, I think you should
weird.
try it because you won't shut up about wanting to be one.
Is that really? I thought you really.
Yeah.
I thought you supported me because you believed in me. Now you're saying that I'm annoying.
Well, I think it's something that I think it's a performance thing that you could probably get better at regardless of. You know what I'm saying?
I've always wanted. It's pretty much the only thing I have not explored.
You know what's funny about this is just my opinion, and I would love for somebody out there who is more knowledgeable about it to let me know. But I don't think that people are more inclined to be comedians. I think there are more people out there that are more inclined to not be comedians. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
more people have it in them to not be funny. Like, all three of us in this room as podcasters, just doing podcasts, I think we could probably do stand-up comedy. I'm not saying it would be great, but I know some people who just have no personality, no charisma whatsoever, that should never have a microphone in front of their face.
I mean, that's a lot of podcasts too. I can direct you
Oh my
to
God.
those as well.
So
99. I've got to throw it out there. One of
Okay.
my favorite quotes that somebody I know said online. I got defensive at first, but then I thought about it. They said 99% of all podcasts are awful. And that sounds like a ridiculous number, but I think it's true. I think it's the numbers are in its favor.
I don't know how much catch up we're gonna play here for our listeners, but
We should
Mike-
probably introduce.
I was gonna say Mike.
This is how we do it here.
Mike Denniston is here, host of War Machine vs. Warhorse podcast.
Yes.
I've asked you before.
Do you feel better about the levels?
I do feel better.
Okay.
I've asked you before on Film Beef. I'm going to have to ask you again. Tell everybody about your podcast and why it is named War Machine vs. Warhorse.
Well, that was a mistake early on. Now, we did manage to get all of the handles for that particular title. It started as, I think for most podcasters, it's just a hobby. It's just something you do to bullshit with your friends. And for me, I was probably having one too many like weeks-long conversations, arguments, debates over like group texts about movies. And there was something in me that was like, this is a colossal waste of time, which is also Twitter too. I just described Twitter for the most part, but at the very least, I guess that's a public form of it. So me and my buddies were like, well, let's try to transfer this to something that we can like actually put out to the world that no one asked for. That's also most podcasts. Sure. And the title, I don't know, the premise is that a new movie will like inspire us to kind of look back at older movies that share a premise, a theme, actors, director, what have you. And then we sort of battled out between the two, like, well, this one approached it this way, that one approached it that way. What is our personal preference? Yeah, and so that's why, the War Machine figure, the War Horse, that is a takeoff off a line from Adaptation with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
With the two twin brothers, if you've seen that movie, where the idiot one is trying to describe his script.
See, I didn't actually know that.
I didn't know that was where it was from.
And he's writing the script about this serial killer,
Yeah.
and the cop ends up chasing him on the horse while he's on the serial killer's like on a motorcycle, and he's talking about how it's this great, analogy. It's a debate between machine and horse. And
Right.
we're like, well, that's a stupid title. And no movie podcast will have that.
Right.
Let's just do it because we're only gonna do this for a month, and then we're gonna stop. And 4 years later, I'm the only one still doing it. By the way, like those friendships are long gone. They're terrible people. No, they're not terrible people, but they just didn't want to podcast anymore.
I was
so.
about to say, so Ryan and I specifically have, we have knowledge of friends of ours that have podcasts with us before that no longer are involved with it. And that's like hard for us to understand, I think. I don't know if you can relate to this or not, but we're so into it and so about it. And I would never put it past anybody to just be like, this is just a hobby. I'm not going to get super into it. But I literally don't understand why people, even just with like extending the invite, especially having done it before, they're just like, nah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that anymore. Like our friend Cody, I think he's a fantastic podcaster. I love having him on, but he just wants nothing. I don't know. Is that fair to say?
Well, no. What's annoying about Cody is that he genuinely enjoys it.
Yeah.
He just doesn't do it. So when and it's like one of the only reasons why we might have a reason to hang out, because he's got his life out in Mount Sterling, and it's like, that's what's disappointing. It's like, I just want a podcast with my buddy, and he doesn't do it.
I've run across 2 different scenarios where, like, I have one buddy that's probably the funniest guy I know, but he has he would be a guy who would never get up and do stand up. He has no confidence in himself. He thinks everything that we think is funny is that we're approaching his humor in a different way, as if we're laughing at him, when really he just has a very skewed viewpoint on the world.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is entertaining.
Which is why he should be a comedian.
Right. He still likes to do it. Like he likes to bullshit with me, but he'll never listen to it. So he never listens back to it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to listen to like podcasts in general.
Okay.
For me, I find that to be a hard
we were talking
nut to crack.
We were talking before we went on air about listening back to stuff to edit and this and that. Do you listen back by any chance, like watching game tape, just to be like, what could I do better or anything like that?
I mean, that's my editing process.
Okay.
Is cursing how much I fucked up, like the conversation. Like, excuse me. Like if I want to talk about Rampage, for instance, which I really wanted to talk about tonight, for some reason.
We can talk about Rampage.
We can talk about it.
But I only want to talk about it.
I can give a fake take the whole
within.
I mean, if I can talk about Cellular, you can talk about Rampage.
Sure. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, fair game. I only want to talk about it like on War Machine versus Warhorse within the scope of movies where men have literal monkeys on their back. And always in those films, these men somehow are like removed from the world by society.
Okay.
But they have this one special thing, which is an absurd, certainly large chimp or ape. And I find that to be a weird thing that pops up in movies almost exclusively.
What was the first one that did that?
Dunson Checks In.
No, even before that, it's
I don't know if that actually
is it Clint Eastwood.
Yes,
that's
it is,
in
sir.
Every Which Way You Can.
Yes, that is a classic. Yes, absolutely. I adore that movie.
That movie has a sequel.
It's
right?
orangutan.
Yes, it does.
Orangutan.
Isn't that absurd?
Isn't it an orangutan?
Yes.
Is it orangutan or orangutan?
Well, I guess that's
It's
just your preference.
It's like,
Tomato.
It's like,
is it though, or is it just one right and one?
I mean, I don't think they're
wrong?
going to be offended.
It's like possum, but opossum. Like it's spelled opossum, but you say possum. So I think it's spelled orangutan, but I think everyone says orangutan.
In my opinion, so I have this thing when somebody tells me that I'm spelling something wrong or if I'm pronouncing something wrong. I just say, I don't care. I'll just say it however I want because ultimately it really, really doesn't matter that we're just using these made up human words. I'm hoping that there is orangutan or orangutan and both you motherfuckers are wrong. So
you've never judged someone's intelligence level for like incorrect grammar?
Let me ask you something, Ryan Stelling. You've been working with me for long enough. Do you think I give a shit at all?
I don't know.
I usually just chuckle to myself and I'm just like, okay. Let's move on.
I think the thing that amazes me about War Machine vs. Warhorse, like the title itself, is that it goes against every single thing that I think you and I have discussed about, like, how do we brand movie podcasts? How do we brand pop culture podcasts? War Machine vs. Warhorse, it doesn't tell you what it is, but it's a successful podcast.
I mean, relatively. Like,
I mean,
speaking.
I think it,
Yeah.
I think it does pretty well. I think if you heard our numbers, you'd be like, yeah, I have a bigger show.
For
Well, I
sure.
don't know. I mean, that's just a matter of like time. How like for the first like that's where some of my I didn't have any friendships that ended over the show, but they were just like, all right, this is not what I signed up for, because I was just like, all right, I'm gonna start guesting on another movie podcast. We're gonna bring on guests.
Right.
We're gonna go like we're going to a convention and
Yeah.
do this. And they were like, no, I kind of just wanted to talk to you.
Right.
And it does put that sort of rub in where you're like, well, I don't want to just talk to you anymore. I want to see other people. And basically it's this weird thing with podcasting where you don't want to like just purely use people, like bring on guests, but you kind of are.
Yeah.
But you end up forming relationships where you're like, oh, I actually have something in common.
Yeah,
with
for
this
sure.
person. We have good conversations.
Well, I mean, I think there's an understanding. Well, maybe not to everybody, I guess, if you have had those experiences. But I think there's an understanding, because I know, like, since I've sort of been operating in the Schmoes and Collider space, and I've seen them interact with other pundits in that space, mainly out in LA.
Pundurance. There's one of those
Pundurance.
words.
I was combining pundits and personalities. So.
you understood him. Let it go.
I know. That's
Yeah,
what
there
I'm
you
saying.
go.
I don't give a shit. I
My-
just had to throw it
My
out.
point being, I think, and you might agree, that I think there's just some kind of level of understanding that everyone knows we're using each other. That's how I would like,
Sort of.
because it benefits everybody.
I think to a certain extent, and everything's going to be different for our stuff that we do with Collider and Schmoes, et cetera. That already has like a built-in audience. So it's not like, I mean, yes, it's great to have people on the show for it to maybe get more attention than it normally does week to week. But for something like Sight and Sound or your podcast, yeah, I mean, that's sort of, it's a part of the business, right? It's a part of the business of podcasting. People guest on other people's shows. Maybe we're showcasing you to our audience right now, or whatever the case may be, and that's how it grows. You said something interesting though, talking about losing friends with podcasting. You said that hasn't happened with you. It hasn't really happened with me.
How you doing?
Maybe it has, but Ryan and I might not really be friends. Is it all for show? That's the question.
That would be more impressive.
Just gonna say
if
that's
it was
a
just for
lot
show.
of
that's not-
effort. I mean,
Yeah, it would be a lot of effort.
we talked about me losing out on a relationship because I wanted to watch Game of Thrones. I
Right.
don't know if I would continue a podcast with someone I didn't enjoy.
Well, but you did so not losing friends, but you talked about people not maybe being on the same level of putting
Commitment.
in work and effort. So have you always been? I mean, did you ever look at your podcast as belonging to you and somebody else at any point?
I think at
during its
first, like
existence?
I like the idea of playing in a band more than I do
Yes,
just by myself. Because if I'm just by
I'm gonna
myself,
bring that analogy back in a minute.
I worry that it's just my viewpoint, and
Yeah.
that like because if I'm inviting a guest on, they're not on every week. There's a certain politeness, I guess, or depending on the guest, there's a certain expectation of politeness. Like, well,
Yeah.
I'll just see how he runs this, and depending on how that goes,
The breaking of the ice.
yeah, like
sort of.
okay, he really is obsessed with this idea of monkeys in movies, so I guess I just need to go with that.
Right.
And there should be some, if it's my buddy doing it or a co-host, there's someone there who's comfortable enough to be like, "What the fuck are you talking about?
Right.
The damn monkeys again this week? Like, why are you talking about this?" I would rather have that because I feel like someone listening, someone is going to think that.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that frustrates me as a listener is when I feel like I've been swept up in one person's version of the world, especially if it's a
Absolutely.
conversational show. There's no counterweight to that. There's no balance to it. So I'm always very worried that it's just
I'm
like if it's just
self-conscious
me.
about that.
Yeah.
I do a solo music show every single week. I love doing that show, and I'm thankful that people listen to it, but it's never been my ideal version of that show. Like I've always wanted somebody else to have those conversations with, just because, yeah, it's kind of like the shit that I'm saying, like the rhetoric that I'm putting across is, it's like I could be completely off on this, and I'm only feeding my own ego with that.
It's not so much that for me, because then you're just sort of denying how great radio personalities came to be to begin with. I mean, that's what it was for, and maybe that's what it still is. Howard Stern, you go to him because you need his viewpoint on the world. So the idea of it just being one person's, and I'm not I'm not going against having guests on or anything. I'm just saying, like, radio was built on one personality,
Right.
or a duo of personalities. And so I think just when I'm self-conscious about podcasting solo, it's just more of like, am I good enough? Not necessarily do people want to hear one person's viewpoint. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I want to bring it back for a second to the question, or maybe not a question, the statement you brought up about branding, how we think about branding our show versus a name like your podcast.
It's a very bad name.
No, but see,
understand.
this is what's fascinating. I love that you brought up the band analogy because this is your first podcast, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I did far too many now, but that's the
Right.
Yeah, that's the main one.
So, I mean, if that's the main one, that's like being in your first band. There are so many bands out there, like the band Thrice or Deftones. That was the only band that any of those members had ever been in. Well, I mean, they've done other things since, but they hate their names. They hate their band names, but it's their band. It's their career band. Sight and Sound, this is our second endeavor. This is, for us, we learn the mistakes and whatnot of starting your first thing, and we were just like, let's just not do those things and start over with something else. So we do have that luxury, but I think it's even more awesome that you've stuck with this one and you sort of rode it out, the horse.
Or the tank.
Well, yeah. I think there's a fear of also the amount of time you put into something. It's very hard to just let it go. Like, because it's like, I would
the investment for sure.
Well, yeah, because I would certainly love to. I'm a stickler for format, so it's like I would love to just stop doing it.
Right.
It's 3 movies an episode, and seeing something new, and so like putting it together without a co-host necessarily, is like a pain in the ass. But I also don't want to like show up on the microphone and sound like this is a huge pain in the ass,
right?
Because otherwise, what the hell am I doing it, and why am I having other people take the time to listen to it? But yeah, there are definitely lessons where I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna do like a half-hour show, and it's gonna be really like very specific about one topic.
Yeah,
that's been my thing. But none of those are anywhere near as successful. But we'll see. They're also easier to do.
Is it a creative outlet for you? I mean, is it a creative, like, do you view it as something that's creative?
I mean, I don't know what I did before, really.
Okay.
I've only been doing this for like 4 years.
Right.
But I think about it too much. I'm sure you all are the same way. Like,
absolutely.
If you're, if you have like
All day, every day.
a regular job that's not particularly stimulating, certainly not creatively stimulating, at the very least, I have this in the back of my mind. So I can say it's a pain in the ass because I'm thinking, how am I going to put it together? But it also passes a lot of time for me throughout the day where I'm like, okay, I need to coordinate that. I need to figure out how I'm going to introduce this topic. How am I going to get in and out of this damn monkey thing? Like, how am I going to make this, how am I going to make this appealing to people that don't share my particular like sensibilities? And if you remove all that, if I wasn't doing it, it would just be a really boring day at work. And I would just be thinking about, well, probably like, fitness or something more productive, like from a health
thinking about fitness.
I don't get people. I don't get people that like don't have some sort of North Star to move towards, like some sort of. I mean, I probably have one. I think we both have one too many projects that we've got going on at any given time. But I mean, those are the things that get me through my work week.
But see, like my buddy that I think is like hilarious, he finds that excruciating. Having something,
and everybody's different,
to do is just something else he has to do, and he just finds that to be like too much pressure. Even if it's just getting on Skype and recording a conversation for 40 minutes, he's like, in his mind, he's like, that's one more thing on my checklist of things to do. Whereas I'm like looking forward to that like fun time.
I mean, some people want to just they want to just live their life, a normal, pretty standard life. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like anytime
they just want to come home from work. They expect a hot meal every goddamn night, sit back in their recliner, have their beers, watch American Ninja Warrior, and then go to bed.
I was going to say American Idol, but
I really like your emphasis on the hot meal too. Like,
isn't that like the cliche, like the wife beater?
What if they just?
I expect a goddamn it's a meal
what if
tray
like
in front of the TV.
What if they're like big fans of sushi? I'm thinking
of
cold sticky rice.
I'm thinking of Danny DeVito and Matilda. Like that's the guy. He comes home, he sits in a recliner with the wife beater. He's got chips on his chest, and
there's always some form of grease on there.
It's a really good movie, by the way. That's
remember
like
Bruce eating
really
chocolate
great
cake. Oh my goodness!
What?
Brucey
Who's
in
Brucey?
Matilda. He's the kid that was forced to eat the chocolate cake
No,
in
I've
front
never
of the
seen it.
student body. So anyway, while we're playing catch up, I think it would be interesting for our audience to know that me and Mike, we've known each other for a couple years, I guess.
Yeah.
Cybernetically,
We've never met each other.
this
No.
is
So how you
this
doing?
is
You're
the
sitting in
first
my
time
house.
I've ever met Mike in person, and you guys have known each other for maybe 45 minutes.
Yeah.
How did we connect?
It's on Twitter at some point, right?
Maybe.
I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I asked you on at a certain point to be a guest
But
on
it
my
was
show.
before that, though. I mean,
I don't know how we
just
started interacting, really.
Yeah, I don't
through,
know either. You might enjoy hearing this.
Ryan's very interactive on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
I was very I don't know if self-conscious was the word, but my experience with you and your show, I was doing Film Beef at the time, and I was sort of discovering this entire other network of film podcasters. And to Mike's credit, he was doing like the Facebook group game before we were. And
it's a terrible idea.
What
Sorry.
it
You'll have
depends.
done far better, I guess. At
Well,
it,
but
What?
he
I was reading a comment. Somebody calling me a dumbass. I'm
He-
like,
on YouTube?
On YouTube.
Mike was always a part of this like film podcaster community. Like,
Yeah.
he's talking about all the guests he
Oh,
has.
yeah.
He works within this film podcast network.
Yeah.
And I sort of became a part of that on Facebook and saw it firsthand. And I don't know, I thought that was interesting because it was sort of one of the first examples of like a Facebook group that I had seen. And I think we carried over some of that as well.
One thing I will say about like those communities like that, I mean, if I'm looking at it objectively, how we've handled it, I think what we have is a little bit it could be misconstrued by some people. Like, yeah, we do our thing with Collider and we have guests on this and that, but that's kind of where it stops. Like, we don't have a lot of guests. Like, we just don't.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I mean, that's, I guess in that sense, our approaches to the Facebook groups or connections or whatever, that they differ in that way.
Yeah.
But
especially for the amount of stuff that we put out, like
like how many people or like movie podcast personalities are you actually in touch with? It's quite a bit.
Oh, are you talking about like on a social network type?
Like Dave and all of those guys.
Yeah, like
Shout out to
it's
Dave.
cool. Like, cause a couple, like Dave is one example, and there's Hyro who does the True Romance film podcast.
Who is Dave?
He actually just I think canceled a show as of like.
Did he really?
In 2 days, it will be gone from the internet. So
I did.
What
not
show
know
does he
that.
have?
Pop culture case study.
Okay, so yeah, just some guy named Dave.
I mean, I'm not going to pimp it out. He's canceled it, so there's no point. You know? But
maybe
no,
that's breaking news to some people. I don't know.
that's what I was talking about. That's my fear is that because he even tweeted out, it's like, hey, if you ever want to listen to these, download them before the end of the month because after that, and that's like that is frightening to me because I'm like, man, that's like years of work, and
Yeah.
I'm on a lot of those fucking shows too. So it's like, do I save these and put them up? I don't
I'm
know.
on one.
Yeah.
Damn it! I was a guest once.
Oh, really?
But someone like him is, I met him at the rehearsal dinner for my wedding. Was the first time I met him in
Okay.
person. And him and Hyro.
Is he local here?
No, he lives out in the Bay Area.
Oh shit!
And he flew in for my wedding, and that was the first time I actually physically saw him, even though we had Skyped a lot with each other and guests on each other's shows. That was really cool. That's still kind of mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
That you and Hyro's from Tampa, so I had these two people from the coast coming in.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's I feel like that's something I like the best and probably the least about it because I like the engagement. If you like, I would rather just. This sounds weird and probably old fashioned. I would rather just give someone like my phone number and just be like, if you want to have a conversation, we'll just text about it because I'm like, I don't want to like. I'll get in these conversations on Twitter and then you'll just have some random person who I don't know.
Yeah.
And they'll misconstrue it or they'll just decide I'm going to take this in a completely different direction. And it's like, I don't know if that's a control freak thing in me where I'm like, no, I don't want you to put your hands on this.
You seem to be a control freak.
In what way?
Creatively.
Well,
Listen,
in
particular.
in your experience with
Just,
me, I'm like,
very
how did I hurt
particular.
you? How did I hurt you as
Well,
well?
You never hurt me.
I mean, I've
I
just
appreciate
met
it.
you tonight, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting to have some control over something, especially if people are comfortable with like the quality that they have over it, right?
Yeah, I'm talking from like a social media perspective.
Yeah.
Like I don't like that feeling that I'm having a conversation with someone as advertisement or performance
Out in the open.
to promote
Yeah.
my persona that in essence will get you to subscribe to my show. That makes me feel uncomfortable.
Oh my God, I get that so much. I get that so much, man. Like I can promote the shit out of something online. I have no problem doing that. But I am very self-conscious about wanting to, and there's times when I might slip into like a quote unquote character of some sort where I'm just like, oh, ripping some movie that I actually like or whatever.
Oh, I will.
But yeah, and that's where we're different. That's completely fine. But I want to be as authentic as possible because I don't want people just to think that I'm just always trying to sell them something.
Always on to a certain extent.
Exactly.
Or you have to
Yes.
have something funny to say.
Yes.
This moment, because most of my conversations they're gonna be plenty of dead ends where I'm like, oh yeah, that's true, and that's it. I don't have, and that all that doesn't make for a good podcast. But since
Right.
I edit my show heavily, that's the point. I drop a clip,
Yeah.
or it's like we move on to the next topic, what have you. So yeah, on Twitter, I'm not as comfortable doing that, or like with Facebook comments, like on your all's group. There was one moment where I don't know if this was like 2 weeks ago where someone didn't like something that Ryan said on the show.
Oh, I saw that.
And I saw it and I was like, I don't like that either. Like it was basically something that was accusing these hardworking folk of not being hardworking enough.
I loved when you stepped into that conversation.
But
I did too.
Well, okay, because I'm like, yeah, on the face of that, I don't really agree with that either. And then, but I'm reading further, and I'm like, if I just listen to this damn thing,
And this isn't a trick question, but had you heard my take on the podcast, or did you just see their version?
I just saw that. Now I went in, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna. For me, that's sort of the responsible part of being like a consumer, if you want to call it that, as a listener. And it has always bugged me if I put out an episode and someone tweets and is like, hey, idiot, Falcon didn't say that in this scene or something. And I'll be like, well, that's not, I was obviously being a little bit facetious in that. Like there's a tone, you can hear my voice. And then someone else piles on. I don't want to issue like a damn correction where it's like, just listen to how I said it. Like that goes back to the promotion angle. But to your old Sight and Sound, when that was brought up, I was like, there's got to be more to it. So just in context of the conversation, even you commenting, I'm like, oh, I kind of get that. Like, I understand where he's coming from. That's the thing where, and I felt weird. I didn't want to have to play like traffic cop there.
No, you shouldn't feel weird at all. And it was even weird for me because, listen, I'll be the first one to be like, oh yeah, Ryan was doing a thing. Like he's off, whatever.
I was gonna say, I think we've established that we are total opposites.
Well, even
I was on.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we have this sometimes on when we do Collider, I mean, if we disagree on something, we let each other know, and we're like, no, I'm in a different direction than you. But in that instance, even I found that a little bit strange that people were as intense about that as it was, because I've heard that take before. And I have the luxury of just being here in the room and seeing how you talk about it,
Right.
I mean, so you're right. Context is everything. And it always sucks too when people, I think this is a problem with just the internet in general. And this isn't me being old man, because I think I love the internet. The internet is amazing. But the one of the worst parts about the internet is so many people taking one soundbite or one headline or whatever and just using that to form an argument or an opinion or whatever the case may be. And people forget that our lives are however many years long and that people can change and this and that. So, but with you jumping in that conversation, it was nice. It was good to see.
It felt weird. It felt like I was exposed because I think mine was like longer, and I felt old instantly because I'm like, oh, that looks too long to be a pithy comment. Like I can't edit that down.
Have you read anything Kevin Marks?
We got some
has
book
ever
writers.
Said? He writes books on that Facebook group.
Yeah, we've got some.
That's probably where I'm a bad consumer, and I'm just scroll.
It's all good, man.
It's fine.
It's all good.
Yeah, so we've essentially established that me and Mike are totally different, and I think
have we established that?
Yeah, I don't
You've
know.
said that.
I think
you say that. But
I felt that. I felt that from the get go, and that's why I always like.
I'm not getting it. I don't.
I'm clearly such a welcoming person.
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I appreciate it because I'm going back to the point I originally made. I still don't think self-conscious is the word, but I was curious about what we might do together. Like when we first started podcasting, because I knew we had just entirely different ideologies. Not that we don't have things in common, but I think we look at things completely different. And I think it's awesome. That's what.
What do you think we look at?
Yeah, is that
different?
down? Is that down to you having context about what he talks about on a show? Because okay,
because
you haven't said that yet, so I'm just trying to.
So going back to the fact that we interacted on Facebook quite a bit, and I saw some of your interactions with Phil and things like that. There was just a lot of Mike thinks this way about certain things, and we never lined up. And I always thought it was hilarious. I just appreciated it.
Yeah.
I never had a problem with it.
That's something we celebrate here. Like, I have no problem if someone doesn't share the same opinion as me. In fact, I want to know why that is, and at least be able, because I think it's great when you can at least say, you have this opinion, you have this view, and I'm over hanging out somewhere else on this, but at least we can come together and talk.
Do you not agree with that?
I mean, I don't know if I have enough evidence. Yeah, I know that probably superhero movies probably would be a major one, which is interesting that you're like, hey, Avengers came out this week. Why don't you come have a conversation?
Because, exactly. I want to argue. I want to duke it out.
Well, that
I
might
want to
be
hear
disappointing.
I want to hear a different perspective.
There's still never been a great Marvel movie.
You're forgetting Iron Man.
It's still not great.
Yes,
it's really good though.
Iron Man is great.
No,
Winter Soldier is great.
Guardians
of the Galaxy.
Definitely no Winter Soldier.
You are the only person who thinks Winter Soldier is a meh movie.
So,
what's your take on Winter Soldier?
Well, Winter Soldier is my favorite Marvel movie.
That's cool, and it's really good. It's really good, but I definitely,
what's wrong with it?
I think it has the exact same things going on with it as every other Marvel movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The twist that Hydra has been infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D. the entire time, the first time they ever attempted that entire genre,
is that a mind-blowing twist?
The game
is that a mind-blowing twist?
Huh?
Is that a mind-blowing twist? That a government agency,
for one, I think
it
speaks volumes that film was accidentally timely, because that was already in production when Snowden and all that kind of stuff was going on. Right. So it's funny how that came about, but you also saw it way later. You didn't see it in theaters.
Right.
You had way more context. You probably knew of the twist based on.
No, I had no idea. I had no idea anything about that movie.
You've never heard about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
I swear to God.
Seen any other movie
listen. I swear to God, I had no context to that movie other than I knew the story of Winter Soldier. I knew who Bucky was. I knew all of that stuff. What I will say about that movie, one of the reasons why I don't hold it in like this crazy high regard, is because all it was, in my opinion, was, and it's fine. I don't even have a negative opinion of the movie. Like I would probably grade it like a B+. Like I think it's a B+ Marvel movie. It's just a Marvel film transplanted with other movies that we've already seen. It's a Marvel movie with a skin over top of it of other political thrillers, which is fine.
You could say that,
but I'm not gonna
any movie in existence.
Exactly,
because when it comes down to it, do you agree that what is the? It's like there's only 7 plots that actually exist.
I can't remember the number, but it's something
like 7.
to that extent.
And I completely get that. So a great movie in that regard for me is a movie like The Matrix. When I saw that movie, I'd never seen anything like that before.
Can a Marvel movie do that though? At this point,
I think it. So the only reason why I think it can is because the only other superhero movie, in my opinion, that's done something as close to that has been Nolan's Batman's. So I've always said this about superhero movies. The worst thing about superhero movies is that, not early on, but relatively early on, especially now looking at it, you have Nolan's Batman trilogy, the first one, the second one specifically.
That's interesting.
Are up so
the third
high.
One's my favorite by far.
Well, and that's
is it really?
Yeah,
I've never.
And that's completely
awesome.
That's completely cool. Obviously, that's not the overall opinion,
Sure,
which
yeah,
is fine.
absolutely.
I don't
Yeah,
know
yeah.
if I've heard anybody say that, which is
Which is totally
interesting.
fine. But regardless, so you have these Nolan Batman films that came out. People are gung ho, so gung ho about it that they're always comparing. Now, maybe not anymore. I don't think people are comparing MCU to Nolan's Batmans anymore. But I mean, do we all agree in this room that Nolan's Batmans are probably the best superhero films to ever be made?
I mean, for me, they are.
Okay.
I think it's going to come down to age. I think
Yeah.
I always compare the Marvel movies more to Star Wars at this point.
Okay.
And I'm not even talking about like Force Awakens.
I think that's a good comparison.
But
Sure.
I feel like, I would have a hard time explaining to someone like why Empire Strikes Back is like one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would totally understand if I just said, hey, just watch Empire. And without any sort of context of what the trilogy means to them, I would have no expectation they would walk away and be like, that's one of the greatest movies ever made. There's too much attachment there from my
Absolutely.
childhood. And just the fact that it's a serial, just like Marvel movies. So that's my takeaway is like, that's why I asked that question. Even as good as a Marvel movie could be, it's like perfectly designed for me.
Yeah.
I think I would kind of agree with you in the sense I would have a hard time saying like that's one of the greatest movies ever made.
Yes.
Greatest experience, possibly. I don't know if I could look at
Absolutely.
it as like a singular thing like 20 years from now and say, just watch this one little piece out of this huge saga. I would have
Yeah.
a hard time distinguishing
It's-
one thing.
Time is the biggest factor with all of this, because going back to your Nolan stuff, I have Nolan's Batman tattooed on my arm. Like
Right.
that trilogy means a whole hell of a lot to me. Batman is my favorite fictional character of all time. I'm very passionate about that character. As time goes on, I get less and less precious about that almighty
course.
trilogy that means so much to me. And I mean, I can't believe I said it on the latest episode I did, me, myself, and Marvel Cinematic. I talked about Iron Man being on the same playing field as The Dark Knight. Maybe not necessarily more so in importance than maybe like quality of film.
Significance, yeah.
Uh-huh. And I was sort of shocked that had come out of my mouth because it felt like I hadn't even thought about it. But when I thought about it more afterwards,
I mean, I would say
I
it's
was like,
more
yeah.
important. I would say it's more.
exactly.
It's a far more important movie.
It feels weird because I think The Dark Knight was more important to movies that aren't superhero films. Like I talked about Skyfall. Skyfall is the Dark Knight of Bond. So I think Hollywood was inspired by the Dark Knight, but Iron Man inspired everything else Marvel was gonna do.
10 years.
And
10 years of film.
because like even DC tried to mirror the format, but they didn't try to cookie cutter the movie.
Oh, absolutely.
Because no DC movie feels like a Marvel movie,
Which is
or looks
brave.
like a
Which
Marvel
is
movie.
brave of them.
And it's fine.
I don't think we give them enough credit for that. They wanted to take the risk of it feeling different.
That's never been the issue for DC for me. Like the
Well,
approach, like
of course.
let's go darker.
Yeah.
That doesn't make a film bad.
Right.
It's everything else.
So to go back to that statement that I've used about I don't think there's ever been a great Marvel movie. What that comes down to, first of all, obviously I don't think everybody should share that opinion. That's just my opinion. It also just comes down to distinction and how I distinct things. When I'm talking about great movies, for me, the movies that I love, that I mean, the movies that inspire me, that blow my mind, that I just don't stop thinking about, they're movies like The Departed is my favorite movie of all time. I love Blade Runner 2049. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Like these are at Fight Club. I think these are incredible, incredible pantheons of film that I say these are great films. I don't use that same terminology with Marvel. I think Marvel's fun as hell. I
Right.
fucking love it. I fist pump to Marvel. I don't fist pump to Eternal Sunshine.
Is this sort
You
of
know?
like a
I
film?
don't get a big ass movie boner for
Is this
Eternal
a
Sunshine.
film
Well, maybe I do.
versus movie conversation?
It probably is. I'm not that guy to have. You know what I'm saying?
I'll be that guy.
Yeah.
I
I
won't.
don't think that's a problem.
Well, I won't
I
say
don't
film
either.
versus movie. I'll say film versus TV. I think Marvel is like
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
peak TV. If you could put TV
Yes.
on the scale of like, $250 million budget for an episode.
Yes.
Feige's a showrunner.
Yeah. And it's like, that's an awesome version of it. But I feel like if you say that, it does come across as insulting.
Did you see the New Yorker headline? that came out. Just to paraphrase it, the headline was and this was like a review, I guess, and the headline was Avengers Infinity War doesn't introduce any characters. It just brings them into the movie, assuming the audience knows what's going on.
Well, yeah.
So that exactly. So I thought it was interesting that.
What a dumb fucking article.
I agree. That's what my joke
better,
was.
New
It's
Yorker.
like, oh, is my 85-year-old grandmother reviewing movies now? Because it's just such an ancient way to approach it. I just thought it was interesting how the MCU is a complete exception in that way. Because if you're talking about Rampage, and you said that exact same thing, that would be a legit criticism. They didn't introduce any characters. We're just supposed to. There's no depth. There's no
Right.
And it's legitimate there, but it's like it's not legitimate when you're talking about the exception to pretty much every rule there is when it comes to what we know of serialized filmmaking.
So let's talk about what is great, in my opinion, of Marvel films in the MCU. Just that it even exists, I think, is great.
Yeah,
it's never been done before in film. And not only that, but I was explaining this to somebody the other day about why they should even give a shit about this. They just don't care about superhero films and whatnot. And that's fine. That I was trying to tell them that there are things about this that should be celebrated regardless. Like the first time I remember back when I saw Batman Returns and I was like, this is crazy that they have two villains. Right? Two villains in one movie?
Yeah.
And then I saw Avengers and I was like, whoa, this is cool. They're juggling some people. And then Civil War was like, fuck. And then obviously we got what we got this past weekend. And I mean, that's an achievement in and of itself, just being able to balance.
I'm not ready to
all
review that yet.
That's fine. I'm just saying that.
I'll say that even as someone that was a huge comic book fan for like my high school and like sort of college experience, like going every Wednesday, having the file, the folder, and picking stuff up. Worked in comic book shops, worked at Comic Cons and stuff.
Yeah.
There was a point in my life, and it led up to right about the time like Iron Man was coming into existence. I was like, well, that's kind of a weird character. I'm saying
really
that as a comic book fan, I was like, well, that'll be interesting to see if that takes off, but because I'm coming from it, like the background of Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, Wolverine.
Yeah.
General audiences will get those characters. They'll be fine. Iron Man, not
I
so
thought
much.
the exact same thing.
So when it was a
I
hit,
thought Iron Man was a boring character.
they're going to do Captain America as well. Like, oh, they're going to go back and like actually like not even have him in present day.
Yeah.
For a whole movie. Well, I don't know if that'll work either, but we'll see. I think it was Guardians. I still held out as long as, was that 2014?
Yeah.
Guardians, I was still like, this is going to be the one where they've pushed it too far.
Yeah.
People are not going to watch a talking raccoon that fires guns and is voiced by Bradley Cooper. This is
Yeah.
too much. I was like, it looks cool. It looks fun, but that won't be a hit. And after that point, I think
I just was worried.
What?
I was worried that if I can hear your headphones,
Ryan's breaking the fourth wall. I mean, I just turned him all the way
that's
down.
also one of my favorite comic book moments, but I won't. From Animal Man. I'm a huge nerd in that regard. It's interesting to me that you're like, you've kind of, because I knew you like, we're going to set this up like, okay, Mike hates Marvel movies, all this stuff. And so I'm like, should I wear like one of my like, should I wear like an Animal Man t-shirt and be like, no,
we've
this is who I
talked
am.
about comic book movies. I know you're a fan of them, but that just doesn't mean that you have to. I know that means that you don't have to be a fan of all of it. Or like there are people who go, because I think if you are a comic book fan for the most part, unless we're talking about the Mandarin twist, I think so many people are just appreciative that they exist.
Is that a LaCroix flavor? It sounds like it does.
I think you are a disciplined comic book fan, whereas like I think there's maybe one not great Marvel movie, but I've never ever been the person that's kind of like that movie is terrible. Because I don't think Marvel, has made a terrible movie.
Yeah, I've never walked away from.
They've made
one.
average ones. They've made ones that I haven't revisited since I saw them in theaters. But when I look at it, it's like it's just it doesn't compare to other Marvel movies. But when I think on the landscape of what makes a bad movie, I don't think they've done it.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean,
I think they've done it a few times for me.
that's fair.
So
That's
like,
fair. Which ones it's haven't
Well,
worked
I don't.
out?
It's strange because we're not yet talking about the new one here. But generally
gotta
speaking,
play catch up.
I I've not liked the team up movies. Like I despise Age of Ultron, which I actually just watched again this week for another podcast. And I was the one who selected it. I was like, no, let's talk Age of Ultron. Which is I think a weird thing for me that I'm like, no, I hated that experience. Let's go back. And let's give it its day in court.
It's important to update your opinion.
Yeah.
I hated Anchorman the first time I saw it. I was like, this movie is so fucking stupid. And then I watched it with a group of people and I was like, I get it.
So outside of the MCU, tell me a movie that you hate.
A movie that I hate.
Like, or just a movie that you think is terrible. Like a terribly made movie. Like,
are you trying to like set the algorithm? Are you trying to like put the okay?
Well, I'd be curious because like the one thing that comes to my mind, it's like I think the last terrible movie, just because I've been really lucky, I'm selective about what I see in theaters. But back when I was doing Film Beef, I just had to see a movie and review it. I think the last terrible movie I saw in theaters that I couldn't leave was Allegiant, the last Divergent movie.
Okay. I can imagine that.
Because I think it's a terribly made film.
Yeah.
And it's so hard for me to think that there's a Marvel movie that even comes close to it. So that's why I think it's fascinating that you're saying there's a legitimately bad Marvel movie.
I mean, I would say Age of Ultron is just as misguided as something like The Danish Girl for me. I would say those two films can sit on the same shelf, and I would be like, yeah, I have the same issues.
I wasn't
with
a fan
both
of
of
that
those.
movie either.
Yeah, I mean,
I can't stand Eddie Redmayne.
He's pretty bad. I mean,
agree.
he's a cancer.
He's responsible for the worst movie in the Harry Potter franchise.
That's true.
I hated that movie.
Yeah.
Fantastic Beasts.
I liked one of the movies that's inside one of that movie. The weird stuff that's going on with that orb. I can't even remember what it's called.
Swiss Army Man. I hated that movie.
Yeah, okay. Anyway.
One giant fart joke.
I like the I guess I like the farting zombie there, but not the fact that he farts. I just like his viewpoint on the world. I like his integrity. I guess you would call it that as a corpse. But I hate to. Is it Paul Dano? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Paul Dano,
See, you guys are more alike.
I don't like Paul Dano.
Than you believe.
I don't like Paul Dano, not because he's bad, but because I hate every single character he plays. He's so good at pissing me off he's like was he a preacher in There Will Be Blood?
Maybe he's a preacher.
And
I
remember wanting to beat.
That's a great movie.
I remember wanting to beat his face in, but it was because he was so good at what he was doing, and he does that every time. He's always playing a character that I just want to punch. Prisoners as well.
Well, I want to ask this question. You wanted some movies from Michael. I want to know like who are 3 directors right now, current directors that get you really excited, like directors that will get you to go to the movies.
Well, Paul Thomas Anderson is one.
Absolutely.
He's probably one of my favorite all time right now, which is it is a little bit weird to say.
What's your favorite PTA movie?
It'll probably always be Boogie Nights.
Okay, fair enough.
Because that's like from my teenage years, and I just thought it was like the coolest shit I'd ever seen. Like it's obviously taking a lot from like Goodfellas and some of Scorsese stuff, but just the music and the fact that it's such a fun movie and kind of absurd. You got John C. Reilly. Like my Twitter bio is a line from Boogie Nights with John C. Reilly. And then like the second half of it, I remember like watching as a teenager, watching with my buddies. They were all into like the porno stuff. They were all like the dick jokes. And then it's like, you know, when people start killing themselves or they're losing their child to a court system because of what they do.
Goes dark,
Yeah, they were like, okay, man, just turn this off. Like, let's just, and I love that. I love that it's like two halves. But man, I mean, you know, I watched pretty much all of his stuff, even like Hard 8, like his first movie, which I think is like,
I haven't seen it.
I mean, you can tell it's like his first feature.
Right.
I still like watched it again this summer with my my grandma of all people.
Have you ever watched his Radiohead music videos?
I don't think I have.
They're pretty
I've seen like some of his stuff when he was dating Fiona Apple. Some of that.
He dated Fiona Apple?
Yeah, they were.
So did Brian Callen.
Where have you been?
Anyway, sorry.
Brian Callen dated.
I think so.
There's
okay.
Yeah,
there's a drop off, I guess, but someone else, like another filmmaker, like working today, they'll get me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steven Soderbergh's very like hit or miss, but I admire that about him.
He's great.
Like Logan Lucky, a lot of like the film Twitter people I interact with were really into it, and I thought it was kind of obnoxious. I didn't find it funny.
There's lately, especially, there are movies that great filmmakers do, and then when they announce that they're doing it, it feels like underwhelming. Like
what do you mean? Give me an example.
I'm underwhelmed whenever Spielberg, like when Spielberg announced The Post, it's like, and this might be on me. But when it's like, okay,
Yes, Steven
The
Spielberg
greatest-
announcing a movie is just like the win.
the
happening outside,
greatest
to me.
director of all time is tackling like a historical drama. Some
Yeah.
of it,
TNT miniseries.
some of
Like,
and some of his
so
best
true.
movies are historical dramas. Like I'm not saying that, but
Absolutely.
it's like, I guess it's more about the subject matter than the label.
A spectacle. He's more of a spectacle. Well, I think the things that
It
you
depends.
look. I think that
my Spielberg,
Right.
yes, my Spielberg is spectacle Spielberg. But something like, I remember thinking it was so weird when Shyamalan announced that he was doing The Visit. Like that might be a bad example because he had such a terrible track record. But when it was like M. Night Shyamalan directs like a mini found footage movie, it's like,
right.
I feel like that's still below him in terms of like, but maybe that was part of his comeback, was sort of starting back at the foundation of that. I'm trying to think of the most recent example of a director that just announced that they were doing something, and I was like, I feel like that's just so underwhelming for who you are.
Did you see Unsane, the Soderbergh iPhone
I have
movie?
not seen it. I want to see it.
That is a movie. That was a fun experience at the theater. Which, I mean, there were not many people that went to see this damn thing, but for like half the movie, I hated it. I was like, man, God, what is wrong with
Yeah.
him? And then the other half, I was like, that is awesome. And it would go like scene
Sure.
to scene. I would be back and
But
forth.
I get that. That's who he is, though. That's who. It makes sense for Soderbergh. I guess. Let me create an example that hasn't existed yet. J.J. Abrams, next big project after episode 9, a romantic comedy. It's like, what?
I would love that. I
Right.
would
It's
love
like,
it.
You would love it.
I love romantic comedies. I love to talk about romantic comedies.
But
I
I'm
also
talking
love
about,
romantic comedies.
but that concoction, like that's the point I'm trying to make. It's like, really, J.J. Abrams is gonna? Do
Yeah, I
something
mean
that,
the closest thing to that I can think of would be, I mean, when Dunkirk was announced, I thought it was interesting.
that is a great.
I thought it was
example.
interesting that Nolan was going to do a war film. Like that's cool, but
Yeah.
that's so. Just because we talked about this when we talked about Dunkirk, it's just
Right.
like, how would Nolan be able to put his Nolan spin? And he did it with the movie, but how could he do that with a war film?
Right.
I was a
We-
little bit
without
underwhelmed.
context. We were confused. Like,
Absolutely.
that's Nolan's next movie. Just like a.
What
a
about
World
Denis
War II
Villeneuve? Are you a fan of his work?
Well, I was not a fan of Blade Runner.
Okay.
I don't know. Like my brother is like a huge like Blade Runner junkie,
Right.
and it's
I
funny.
hated
like,
the original.
The
oh,
original's
he
not-
yeah.
like he liked analyzed like every cut of that like
Right.
when we were younger, like and all the versions. And I know I watched it a couple times. I think I watched the one with the narration, and then I watched the first director's cut or whatever it was. And I dug it. I thought it was like a cool movie, but I never like came back to it. There were not like characters in that movie that I was like I identified with.
There are not characters in that movie. Go ahead.
That that is kind of a more. I mean, that sounds harsh, but even as a fan of it, you could be like, oh yeah, kind of.
Right.
It looks good, and that's about all. That's all.
It's like
about
it is kind of like a
Dunkirk.
really cool, like very long music video. Kind of, it's just like a mood
You
piece.
talking about Suicide Squad?
That
I
one,
haven't seen Suicide
that
Squad.
one I
so-
hated. That one
It's a
I.
music video.
Even with Suicide Squad, I tried to give it. Actually, I got married. We went on our honeymoon, and I came back, and it was like in September, so it'd been out for like a month and a half,
Yeah.
2 months, and I felt like, okay, there's enough distance from this hate of this movie
Right.
that I can watch it now. And then I watched it, and like 10 minutes into it, I was like looking at my wife.
It's horrible.
I'm like, I'm so sorry. I thought
Yeah.
I could be the contrarian here, but no. But Prisoners, I dug.
great.
Enemy, I loved. I loved Enemy.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll watch anything he does because
Arrival. Did you like Arrival?
I did not like.
I wasn't
Arrival.
as high on Arrival either. I mean, I like it. I think it's fine, but
It's my favorite movie.
it's fine at best.
Is it really?
of that year?
Oh, well, I mean, that's so sentimental though. I think that was the stuff I couldn't get into it. I don't like kids, so that
Yeah,
idea.
fuck a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, it was hard for me to engage with, but I know like people who like it really moved them, and so it was one of those things that I sort of kept my negative opinions quietly to myself. If someone asked me, I'd be like, I didn't really dig it, but a lot of people really were like you. you know?
Emotion. It doesn't matter what the emotion is, but if the movie pokes any kind of holes in me, it's like that's what's fun about movies. It's like if you ask me some of my favorite movies on the same playing field, I would put like Room with Brie Larson because it made
I
me.
just started watching it. The
It
other day.
made me.
Haven't finished it yet.
That movie makes me cry like a baby.
We are. See, now we're back to being really different because I hated Rome. I hated it.
That
I
movie
only-
makes-
I've
well, I
only
was
seen
gonna
half
say,
of it.
on the same playing field. If you were to ask me, throw me some of your favorite movies. Room. Don't Breathe.
Okay, I haven't seen No Breathe. That's the horror movie, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I've not seen
And
that.
it's just because the amount of emotion and Don't Breathe was more of like a fist pump. Like I was just having a lot of fun. I was genuinely terrified. I love the filmmaking behind it. And Room made me cry like a baby, and I saw brilliant performances from one of my favorite actresses. It's like, you know how I love that Spectacular Now crew.
Yeah, yeah.
But so it's like that's what's great.
I didn't care for Spectacular Now.
Huh?
Oh,
I didn't
God.
care for that movie.
I love it.
That was my favorite movie that year. Was that
Spectacular
13?
Now?
2013?
Yeah, that was my number
Yeah.
2.
Really?
No, it was 15. It was 15.
Was it later than that? I thought it was the same year as Llewyn Davis. I thought because
Oh wait, 15? No, it wasn't 3. It's not 3 years old. It's 13.
I think it is
I'd-
13.
12 or 13.
Because Inside Llewyn Davis
You're
is the
right.
one I got into an argument with a buddy, and he's like, "Really, Spectacular Now over that?" And I think Inside Llewyn Davis.
Yeah,
Like I look at that and I'm like, okay, that's probably a better movie.
I need to see it. I haven't seen
Spectacular Now, we talked about on me and him.
it.
Talked
So,
about on his podcast.
what's the other Brie Larson movie? Short Term 12 with Lakeith Stanfield.
That,
Haven't
that
seen
movie
it.
made me cry like a
I
baby.
started that, but I wanted to. I need to keep watching it.
It's really
We
good.
haven't asked you. What are some of your? He might know. I don't know.
I'm gonna go to the bathroom. While
What
you
are some of your
guys
favorite
be
movies?
friends.
Some of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
I have like my sort of like top 4 from like when I was first getting into film. I remember my mom
Mhm.
taking me to see Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
And I was in 6th grade, and they didn't want to sell her a ticket to bring me because they're like, you shouldn't.
Right.
And I just remember her like losing her mind to like get me in there, like, don't tell me how to raise my kid, like.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I have that attachment with Pulp Fiction that was like the first like adult movie that I like got to see, or like my mom was like
You were
sharing this with me.
13?
I was 11.
Oh
when I
my
went to see it.
god!
Yeah.
I don't think I actually got to watch rated R movies until I was like 14 years old.
I've told this story before on another podcast, but it's like she was like, "You have to see this. You're into movies. You need to
Yeah.
see this movie." And I was like, "Okay, that's cool." Up to that point, my favorite movie was probably like Die Hard, which
Okay.
is also R-rated, but it's like people
Yeah.
just shoot each other. There's nothing to really think too much about.
Right. The dogs are in here.
Dogs are on the microphone.
It's okay.
But-
Ryan will get them out of here.
Yeah, Pulp Fiction is one, which is like not a cool answer at this point now because it's like it's been college dorm room posters for like years.
That's a type of movie I think if you see it, especially. Yeah, I do. Get the dog out of here. I think Pulp Fiction is a good movie to put on a list like that, specifically if you see it at a younger age, especially if you see it closer to when it came out.
Yeah, because it's been aped so many times. Like,
Yeah.
and I know Pulp Fiction and Tarantino, he pulls from a lot of different like resources, references that I won't get because I
Right.
didn't have access to some Korean movie that he saw like
Yeah.
at the video store. Just didn't come my way. But yeah, like seeing Pulp Fiction, I didn't even really know what I was watching.
Mhm.
I was like, they can do that in movies? Like, what?
Right.
Wait a minute, why are we back? Like,
Those weird storytelling,
yeah, Travolta's
unconventional. Yeah.
come back, from the dead here. What's going on? So that's what I always say. I always say Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho because I have fond memories of like VHS days watching that as a kid and
Mm-hmm.
not understanding the shower sequence, not understanding that you can kill off like your main character, and
Yeah.
then I'm just sort of like, who are we watching now? But honestly, my Boogie Nights is one I mentioned, and Zodiac would be another one. Zodiac would probably.
Zodiac's so good.
Zodiac is like the one I tell people maybe like my real favorite movie because it's
Wow.
well in the sense that I was like a fully formed adult. Like there's a lot of stuff I watched like in the 90s when I was first getting into movies. And then Zodiac came out. I went to the theater and see it with a bunch of friends. They all hated it. They said it was too long. It was boring.
That's exactly how I
And-
felt when I watched it the first time in the theater. I never watched it again, and then I just so my girlfriend Kayla is obsessed with murder mysteries, like obsessed. And I think she had seen it, but we rewatched it recently, and I was blown away because I love Fincher, but I think that movie might be. This is my opinion, but I think it might be the quintessential Fincher film. Like
it's about obsession. So it's
Yes.
directed by a guy who's obsessed with very minute
Yeah.
details, and he gets to have that in the
the
plot.
look, the feel, the pacing, the characterization, how gritty, gritty and dirty almost everybody looks because of that obsession. I think that's Fincher to me.
But
I
if you
haven't seen it.
You've never seen Zodiac? What the hell? You should. I think it's on Hulu or Amazon right now.
It's on Netflix.
It's on Netflix right now.
So that means that
You should watch that and then the season
means I
finale,
have to-
Mr. Robot,
I was gonna say I have to make an appointment,
which is also a
with,
Fincher film.
right. I have to make an appointment with Mike, and we can do a never before scene. on
There you go.
Saturday. So yeah, we'll definitely do that. Anyway, I'm sorry I didn't mean to interrupt.
I would say if my
Yeah.
just to wrap that up, you're asking me what my favorite movie is though, like the one I probably just watched the most, that's Rear Window, Alfred Hitchcock's movie with Jimmy Stewart, and
It's really good.
I just find it so pleasant, and it's like
Yeah.
every time I watch it, I get something different out of it. Like when I got married,
Mhm.
I was like, oh shit, this is a movie about commitment. This
Yeah.
is about a guy that looks out his window
Also about obsession.
Yeah,
as
and
well.
some obsession.
and he sees how his life could go in every character, every neighbor
Yeah.
there. And the fact that his, Grace Kelly, this put upon Jimmy Stewart, has Grace Kelly that wants to marry him, which
Right.
is a terrible situation to be in, looks out his window during this and sees a man murder his wife.
Yeah.
It's just kind of twisted to me that's like, this is it is kind of a romantic comedy at times. Like that's how him and Grace Kelly end up getting together and bonding more, is over this woman who is
Right.
butchered across the
Right.
way. I don't know. I like that's a very fun
You know
murder
what
rom
the,
com.
you know what the winter soldier of Rear Window is?
Suburbia.
Disturbia.
Disturbia.
Suburbia.
Whatever. It's called.
Suburbicon.
My
yeah.
my problem with Disturbia is I think it's interesting to put it like I think he's a teenager, right? Is he a high school student? I can't
Yeah.
remember.
I don't remember.
Yeah, he is.
It's hard to take everything I like about Rear Window and put that in the hands of a teenager.
Yeah.
Because there are no commitment issues in that. He is just like, man, that girl's hot, my next door neighbor. And that's not as interesting to me as
Right.
Jimmy Stewart, who's
I mean, they're different movies. I mean,
They're different
I just
demos,
meant-
yeah.
I was making the same comparison you were, but it's not like they're exactly the same.
But see, I actually think I like your point, because I think you should give Disturbia it's like the time. You should give it
Oh, I enjoyed that movie a lot.
yeah, like I actually
Yeah,
I did a
similar
podcast
modern.
about Rear Window and Disturbia together,
Mhm.
which is a little unfair to Disturbia to be like, look at the master of the form and then Disturbia. But it is fun. Like, how do you make Rear Window for teenagers in like the mid-aughts or whatever?
Absolutely.
And I do think they successfully did it.
I agree. I think it's a great
So.
film. That was also about the time that Cellular came out.
See, I thought in my head, I was like, it's probably going to go back to the glory days of thrillers right here.
I was just thinking about how
dare you.
It's funny how I think you talked about not being fully formed yet. You wanted to, like, when you saw Zodiac, that's when you decided that might be your favorite film, because that's when you were adult and fully formed in that way. And I was sort of, as you were talking, thinking about all of the movies that made like really big impressions on me, but I haven't put in my top list. The Bourne Identity is that for me, because that came out. Shut up, Jay. The Bourne Identity was like one of those movies that when I was in middle school and I'd had nothing to do, and my mom just let me.
Right.
We talked about how like when I turned 13, it was like really eye opening because I had parents that would let me.
That's
watch
what we were talking about
PG-13.
while you were
Oh, is it?
relieving urine out of your urethra.
Yeah, my mom made me go watch Pulp Fiction with her when I was 11. Like, said, you have to see
I
this.
had
That's what you missed.
I got grounded for seeing Troy when I was like
Oh, yeah?
14. I was like 13 or 14. And yeah, I got grounded for seeing Troy. And Troy is a mild R film. But anyway, that's
Now she did make me cover my eyes during the Gimp scene, which actually
really?
only made it worse because you don't really see much in the movie.
Yeah.
So all I was left with was hearing it and then imagining what you could be seeing, as opposed to just seeing a door. And I've told her that. I'm like, that was terrible parenting.
Okay,
I mean, not
so
just taking me to the movie,
I feel
but
like
that.
we might have talked about this before, but like awkward movies that you've watched with your family that you were like, ooh. I remember when I was on vacation with my grandparents and we wanted to have a movie night.
I love this story.
I was like, I was super young whenever it came out. Decided to watch with them Something About Mary and with my grandparents.
Ugh.
And like, I remember the scene where he like gets, he's jacking off and he
Yeah,
puts the jizz in her hair or whatever. And I like just didn't get it at all. Like that was just like,
You
I
didn't
don't-
ask questions though, right? Like
Yeah.
you didn't.
I really didn't.
You didn't turn to.
I remember
I just remember
watching,
Brett Favre being in the movie.
I remember my dad. I should have said my mom was that way. My dad, they were divorced. So when I go to my dad's house, he would get me into Bruce Lee movies. And I don't know if have you seen any Bruce Lee movies?
My dad was big into him, but I never.
Fist of Fury.
Yeah, like I remember him trying to get me to watch
So I
it.
watched Fist of Fury, and there's a scene where he's in bed, and the lady takes off her top, and it was probably the first time I'd ever seen tits in a movie, and I was, probably like 8 or 9. And I remember feeling very, very awkward because part of it was
Your pants
like
got
I'm
tighter.
experiencing,
Your pants got tighter.
I was 9. I don't think biologically that was happening, but
You can get a boner when you're 9.
Yeah,
it's more
speak
like
for yourself,
I thought it was
Ryan.
more, I thought it was
for
more like
yourself,
an
Marlon.
11 thing.
Yeah.
My nephew's 7. There's no way he's close to getting a boner. If you've met my
I don't
nephew,
know. Ask him.
I'm not gonna ask him.
See if he wants to watch some Bruce Lee movies.
Hey man,
and
you
then
ever had a boner?
watch closely?
There's something weird about wanting my nephew to get a boner.
What if he went up to your hey man, you ever get a boner? You ever get rock hard for
he wouldn't
like
even know what
Dora
I
the
was
Explorer
saying.
or something like that?
He's 7. Anyway. I remember thinking at that time, this is weird that I'm watching it with my dad, but it's also weird because I'm not entirely sure what I'm looking at. Because it was just like the first time,
Yeah.
like when the Indians couldn't process Christopher Columbus's ships.
You never
It
saw
was
your
like
mom's boobs or
It's
anything like that?
No.
Okay.
Jay, do you want to tell us?
Why would I have seen my mom's
tell
tits?
us
I don't know.
your first
I
experience?
just never accidentally walked in or on the shower. Isn't that what the experience is?
I mean, I guess so.
You walk in on her accidentally in the shower or something like that?
I guess so.
I don't know how that can happen, by the way. You hear that someone's in the shower.
I think you just don't care at that point, right?
I
If
think
you're that
you're a
little,
kid and you're
yeah.
just like, whatever. I have to poop or whatever.
I think my first.
Did you grow up with one bathroom?
Yes. Yeah, right down the road here.
And
Our house had one bathroom.
You couldn't just wait 2 minutes to poop?
I was a fucking kid. I don't know.
Why are you berating the
Yeah.
little version?
I didn't
of Jay?
experience this. It's all new to me.
I'm just doing random shit. I remember I was little and I reached my hand into a fire one time. Just was like, hey. That was awful.
I remember
My dad put horse salve on my hand.
I remember touching a
There you go.
stovetop as an experiment.
Well,
Don't touch-
why would you touch that? I mean,
Don't touch it.
Do you
Don't
know
touch
it's
it.
hot?
Well, I just want to see.
Yeah.
Ow.
what were we talking about?
Boobs. We're talking about
talking about
boobs we
tits.
saw in.
Oh,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think
Awkward movies with families.
I think I watched Not Another Teen Movie with someone's parents. I
Does
can't
that have
remember
Chris
what-
Evans in it as well?
Yeah, it does.
Good lord.
I'm a big Chris Evans fan.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I also think that's one of the most underrated great spoof movies. It's laugh out loud hysterical.
Yeah, they kind of ruined the spoof movie, didn't they, after a while?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Hot Shots. I was a big fan of Hot Shots back in the day.
My favorite scary movie is Scary Movie 3. I think that's an unpopular opinion.
Really?
I love Scary Movie 3.
I never cared for the scary
Laugh
movies
my ass
because I
off.
never liked
the only one- it's-
Scream to begin with. So
That's the hard part about them. Scream was already like the jokey version anyway.
yeah, I mean it's already campy and yeah.
I mean, I like the first scary movie. I don't know if I watched any of the other ones though.
Right.
Scary Movie 3 is really good. Just stupid hilarious. But anyway, Kung Pao.
That's one. What you said earlier, Jay, about like a movie you come back to that you hated. My buddies, I had 2 buddies. Actually, 2 of them that I started the podcast with. Loved Kung Pao, and they would have it on. And I'd be like, "Would you turn this off? What is this?" And then like
get it.
they're like, "No, you just have to sit down and watch it." And I finally, I did sit down and watch it, but it was one of those things. It's really uncomfortable where it's like, and as you get older, you like hopefully give into it. But like, if someone's trying to tell you something they think that you would enjoy,
Yeah.
and you don't think that you will, but you do watch it and you enjoy it, you should say thank you or like, "Wow, you kind of know my sensibilities."
That's how I
But-
feel every time I recommend a band to Ryan that he likes and he doesn't thank me.
Well,
for
I
it.
was probably like 20 or 21 when they were like, "No, watch this movie." And I was just too immature to like give in. So I had to sit there silently thinking stuff was funny. It's no way to enjoy a
Yeah.
comedy to be like spitefully holding in laughter. And then like afterwards, like I've watched, I own it. It was on sale on like iTunes for like $4.99. And I was actually excited that day. I was like,
Yeah.
I've got to own this. So I'll agree with you on
Don't
that
you
one.
think it's weird that like your parents would show you movies knowing, and maybe they didn't think about it, but it would. I know it would be on my mind if I thought about showing my kids Ace Ventura. I remember seeing Ace Ventura for the first time, and I was young, and it's not that it's explicit in the sense that it's showing you things, But in that sex scene, the bed is like slamming up against the
Right.
wall, and Courtney Cox is screaming, and it's like, and it only lasts maybe 7 seconds, but it's just enough to be awkward. And I always thought it like, why
'cause-
why didn't you skip this scene? Like, you made this uncomfortable. You know what's coming, and you showed it to your son. Anyway.
Even today, when I watch like movies with weird stuff, not weird stuff, it's sex, but something like that, nudity in a movie with my family, I always do the same thing. If I know it's coming, I usually just get up and go to the bathroom so that I don't have to. Then I come. What did I miss?
They know that you did that.
Of course they did. That's fine. I'll even tell. I'll be like, I don't want to be in here.
Huh.
Well, my dad's checking out some girl's tits or something like that. It's fucking weird.
So back to meeting Mike.
What?
It's a great.
Oh wait, I was going to tell
I'm
you.
just trying to hold off on.
Actually, two things, real quick, to talk about a movie because it ties in.
You didn't want to make this a movie episode. It's an after party.
It's fine.
We have a
We talked
guest.
about podcasts after this, or we talked about podcasts before this. Podcasting. So, a movie that I watched recently that I updated my opinion on and liked it more, and from not really caring that much for it, was actually Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Oh wow. Okay.
That was recently. In fact, I proclaimed that Avengers: Age of Ultron was a better film than I think the original Avengers movie is like. It's great. I'm sorry, it's not great. It's a good film. It's a really good film, but there are some huge issues with it. The characterization of that movie is really poor.
I don't agree with that.
It's so bad. People
Why?
literally just show up and say, "Who are you? I'm this person. Okay, let's go do this." That the only character that actually shows any sort of depth in that movie, and in my opinion, steals the show, is Bruce Banner as the Hulk. Is incredible in that movie.
And the Hulk is in the last 30 minutes of the movie.
I'm not talking about the Hulk. I'm talking about Bruce Banner.
You
Bruce
said
Banner.
Hulk.
Well, Bruce Banner and / the Hulk. I don't know if you knew this or not, but they're the same person. But throughout
It's a different presence in that movie.
But throughout the entire movie, like Tony Stark literally shows up and he looks like Tony Stark playing Tony Stark in the Avengers. He's just like, I'm this caricature of this person that I play in these other movies. What's up? And then he just leaves.
I think as we get spoiled with things like Civil War and Infinity War, when you go back and watch the Avengers,
Yes.
you forget, maybe other people forget, that it was unprecedented.
So what?
And
Blade Runner was unprecedented when it came out, and today I watch it and it bores me to shit. I rewatched Alien recently, and Alien I think looks like poo poo now.
you probably rented standard definition or something. On
No,
accident, but
for what? For Alien?
Yeah.
Alien is it's boring. Ridley Scott, not a fan. I'm just kidding. There's some Ridley Scott stuff that I
I'm
really
totally fine with that take, by the way.
Yeah.
Ridley Scott might be the most hit or miss
Yeah.
prestigious filmmaker.
I've never
Because
seen-
if you ask a cinephile top 5 all-time best directors, do you think Ridley Scott is going to be a common answer?
I think it depends on their love of Alien and Blade
Yeah.
Runner. I think his
But it's like-
top tier depends on how they define
And
it.
I'm
but
not even precious.
Well,
about
those are
Blade Runner.
those are
He's
such
made so many.
those are
stinkers.
such I mean iconic movies that came out at that time that I get it. I get why people would be. It's like the same. And this is. I'm about
It's
to
like
say
the
something
Avengers.
ridiculous. It's like the way I feel about early Adam Sandler as great comedies. Like Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore, I think are fucking great.
Waterboy.
And Waterboy, but like if you show them to people like younger people today, they might just be like whatever about it. I kind of understand. I get it.
I mean, that old chestnut. There's not a day doesn't go by on film Twitter I don't hear Ridley Scott and Adam Sandler's career arcs.
I know, but that's
Very
what I'm saying.
similar.
Parallel. They're very hit or miss, especially more recently.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I like
that-
Tony Scott more myself. So
Okay.
Tony Scott was at least consistent, you know? Like his movies might not ever climb the prestige of a Ridley Scott movie, but he just had
Did you
a
ever see
way
The
about
Hunger?
him. Huh?
I think The Hunger, is that his first movie, The Hunger, the vampire movie he did?
I don't know.
It's got Dave Boy. I think you would dig that.
Really?
Yeah, I think that seems like
Cool.
a
What about?
smelling joint.
I want to hit some other big ones real quick. Kubrick fan.
Oh yeah, I mean, like that's if you like film. I think you have to be.
Jesus.
He doesn't pass the Rear Window test for me
do you mean?
necessarily. Well, like as far as like I'm thinking like this is a movie I watch every 6 months for pleasure.
Yeah, I don't know if you dive into Kubrick for that.
There's not
reason.
rewatchability with Kubrick.
Now, I do watch Eyes Wide Shut a lot.
Really?
Yeah.
Of all of them, it's that one.
That's my Christmas movie. I watch that every Christmas.
So, hey, I swear to God, here's my story with Eyes Wide Shut. I might have told this story on the podcast. So, I've seen that movie a lot. Like, I really have seen that movie a lot. And it had been a long time since I saw it. And then it's on Netflix now. So, I watched it recently and I realized that I've only seen like the first 30 minutes of that movie, because when I saw it a bunch of times, it was when I was young and I just wanted to watch that sex party scene as a kid on HBO. And then I was like, what? There's shit that happens after this? Like,
Wait, so you only watched the sex party, or you never made it to the sex party?
So the sex party is like, it happens like in the second act of the movie, right?
Right. Yeah. There's
Like kind of the midway point.
Yeah, because there's a whole he tries to revisit every place he went that night.
Yeah, and I never got to that point, and I was like, "Holy shit!" I couldn't believe it.
That's the biggest turnaround I've ever had on a movie. I hated it. I laughed at it in the theaters. That's another one my mom took me to because I was 16 when that came out, and I could get
Your
into.
mom took you to Eyes Wide Shut.
My mom took me to Eyes Wide Shut.
Pulp Fiction double feature.
Yeah, and she to this day despises Eyes Wide Shut. She thinks it's stupid. Anytime I talk about how much I love it now, she thinks I'm just being a pompous asshole.
Yeah.
Because she remembers me laughing at
Makes
it, and
sense.
she laughs at it.
Yeah.
I mean, if any movie, that is definitely one that screams snob to a certain extent.
Do you consider yourself a movie snob?
No, not really. I mean,
just embrace it.
I do.
in what
You consider yourself a movie
No,
snob?
him.
but in what way? Because it's like
I
I
don't
don't.
know.
Because
I do feel like you judge me sometimes.
I judge you.
Like with my opinions, like, oh, that's such a Snelling thing.
Hey, I recommend The Hunger to you. That's my favorite Tony Scott. I said that's a Snelling joint. That's a compliment.
But that's another thing too. Going back to that Facebook post that you dropped in, I told Jay, I said, Mike gets me.
There's sometimes where I think people think that I'm a music snob because of the music that I get really deep into music sometimes, but I also love like what I would consider popcorn music. Like I love Drake.
Your
Drake is
music
amazing.
approach though, especially when you podcast, your approach is let me tell you about this person. And I think that's what might come off as like snobby. It's like,
absolutely.
Like when I talk about movies, I'm not necessarily telling you about.
That's more catered though
Not
towards
like a lesson.
it's more catered though towards our audience, just for the sole fact that just playing the numbers game, a majority of people probably wouldn't have.
And also,
context.
I mean, people can call you a music snob, but that doesn't mean that they're like doing it in a judgmental way. Like,
oh, absolutely. Oh, I would own it if I was. I mean, if I was a film snob, I would own it.
What do you think the difference is between like a music snob and a film snob?
So there are. I think that the term of snob, whatever pop culture thing you go into, really. Like it sort of comes with a dong approach. Like to be a dong in the sight and sound universe is to have a negative connotation of something without ever having to have experienced it. So it could be somebody, for instance, that looks down on Marvel films because they're just action-packed tentpole movies.
James Cameron's approach to Marvel films.
Yeah,
that's a dong approach.
Without ever having experienced it or whatever. And a music snob's thing would be like, I love these really obscure artists and this and that, and anything that's popular on the radio is straight trash, and they can't see the merit for it at all. Like Drake, I say the same thing about Drake all the time. I love Drake. I'm super passionate about the stuff that he makes, but there is no way in hell I can ever foresee a world where I would ever put his album or an album that he makes as my album of the year. It just wouldn't happen. In the same way that I could never see a Marvel film winning an Oscar. You know what I'm saying? But for me, I could put a Marvel film.
Well, I mean, when you put it that way, then I guess now that I'm thinking about it, people would call me a movie snob, even though I don't consider myself that, because you and I have talked about when you're speaking to the casual moviegoer and like you're in the break room at work and somebody's like, so what'd you think of so-and-so? And as I start talking, I see in their eyes, they realize they made a mistake. Because if you ask me what I think of this movie, I'll give you, a few sentences, but a detailed reason why.
Well, there's levels.
But the
to this
casual
game.
person in the break room that passes you, what'd you think of this? They only want you to say it was good. because I'm overstaying my welcome if I like, well, I thought the characters were done better, and it's like I've already lost them. So
Right.
that person would call me a movie snob because I just care that much more.
I think anybody who is as into any one of the pop culture realms like we are to a casual everyday individual, we would probably all three come across as snobs, but within our own bubbles and stuff. Yeah, I think there's levels to that game.
See, I think it's a hard line though, because to me, I don't consider myself a snob.
Right.
Because I know there's a lot of stuff I don't know, and there's a lot of areas that I don't really have much interest in. Like there's a lot of people that are like Kurosawa fans.
Yeah,
and I can attempt.
Is that Seven Samurai?
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like I've seen.
Are you surprised I knew that?
Sure.
But it's
He's
like
terrible with names.
I can watch that, and I have
Yeah.
in parts, but
Mhm.
I can't like say like, oh, I got that much more out of it than someone else, or that it speaks to me personally. But it was like homework to a certain extent.
So you could have a take on it.
Well, you are kind of. I think you should be curious, like
Yeah, for
that,
sure.
and to what Ryan's saying as far as like a casual moviegoer, I don't think they're generally speaking curious about what they're consuming. Like because I'll see it when I go to the movies. I'll be like, all right, I'm gonna go watch A Quiet Place at this time, or I would like to go see it again on Tuesday because
Right.
I want to have a better take on it. And every time I go to the theater, locally here in Kentucky, it's always someone like, so when's the next Avengers playing, or what is this?
Yeah.
What is this horror movie that's got Jim in it? Like they've no.
Yeah.
It kills me that I feel, I guess, a little snobby there because I'm like, wait, you put so little thought into like what you're going to consume that day
Yeah.
that you're just like, what is this that I'm about to pay you to consume for 2
Right.
hours? I don't understand that mindset. I like to be engaged with what I'm about to, even if I've not even seen it yet. I want to kind of be aware of what I'm about to consume that way, not in a spoiler way.
Yeah.
I try to discipline myself because I know that I'm overly passionate about this kind of stuff. So I try to think about what the casual movie goer is going through when it comes to stuff like this. That's why I like examining box office, because I like deciding what people are thinking about movies that I'm not necessarily.
We're both pretty aware of that too.
Yeah.
Like making sure that
I try to do my best with that. And I was literally laughing earlier today thinking about the idea that I don't know if casual movie fans, I don't think they have any idea that Avengers 4 comes out a year from now.
Yeah.
So imagine
Well,
their thoughts
we'll
and-
talk about that in a
Okay.
second because
Well, before we get to that, one of my favorite things, the one thing that I know me and Mike have in common, actually all three of us have in common, is that going back to these Facebook groups, how much do you fucking hate? How much do podcast Facebook groups annoy the shit out of you? And I'm not talking about like what we do in Sight and Sound and what you might do like on Following Films or whatever. I'm talking about Facebook groups that are for podcasters learning about podcasting. How do they make you cringe as much as they make us cringe? People's takes on podcasting.
Okay, I'm going to come across as a little bit of a snob there
Do
because
it. Let's do it.
because
Please.
the reason I
are we
like
podcasting snobs? Yes, we 100% are.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't think, but see, I know so little, but like what I want to know about, I feel like I can never break through that barrier when it comes to Facebook groups, where we all get to a point where it's like, okay, all that stuff's been asked, all that stuff has been discussed. Can we now like
What you're getting to is just search for whatever
yes,
question you're
yes.
asking
There's got to be a FAQ somewhere, probably in a sidebar, or go to I don't know.
on Google.
And it's like, I use those groups because I want to target personalities, or it's
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
I'm looking for guests all the time.
Yes.
And it's like, especially in these time periods, like, if there's a movie about, even if it's something as stupid as like the Melissa McCarthy movie that's coming out, like about the mom going back to college,
Mhm.
I'm thinking in my head, man, I would really like to have someone that is a mother, first off, come on and talk about that. Ideally, someone like that has a podcast maybe about those issues, like about trying to either re-enter the
That's
workforce,
interesting.
something like that. So I go to these damn groups and I'm like, okay, I can find that. There's a podcast about everything. And you have to wade through how do you submit to iTunes?
Oh my God.
What mic do you use? And I attempted to do a Facebook group with just like people I'd had on before. And I'm terrible with Facebook. So I was just like,
Right.
yeah, just invite some cool people and it'll make it easier for all of us to have guests and we
Yeah.
can like rely on each other. And if it had been up to me, I would have started like probably a chat room with like 12 people and then just be like, can you recommend someone? Snelling, can you recommend a mom to me? Which would be, if I didn't have context, would just be a weird thing to pop up on your little messenger.
Ryan doesn't
I'm
know
really
any
into
moms.
right
But
now.
yeah, but then I would be like, for this podcast, I want someone who can speak with some expertise on that matter or just from that viewpoint. And it fails. Like, it's just like, it's one of those things that I have found some really cool people on there. But wading through all of it is depressing. And eventually
It
I'm just
really
like,
is.
all right, I'm going to get my buddy who I think's funny, who's single, has no relationships, is nowhere close to being a mother as
Right.
far as I know, because he's a dude. And he'll just come on and he'll give me his input. I hate that. I hate the idea that I've sort of settled, but I think you kind of have
Well,
to.
it's because the podcast group is beating you down to where you have to settle for
For my buddy.
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
So,
The dude.
Something I say all the time is that, especially, I think it definitely applies to like a 2018 kind of thing. But something I say all the time is, I don't think anybody's dumb for having questions. I think you're dumb if you ask the question before Googling it first. And so, for the listeners who might not even realize what we're talking about, but the people in these podcast groups drive me nuts because there are still people that are just asking like, do you use podcast hosting? What's the best If you just took a second to just maybe compare prices,
Yeah.
because when you get into it, podcast hosting does not really vary across different.
Right.
There's just like 10 of versions
It's like
of
very,
the same thing.
very minor things that
Yeah.
are different about
It's
one
10
rather
versions
than
of the
other.
same thing. All
Yeah.
that matters to you is that you have unlimited hosting and a cheap price. And there's all sorts of examples of people just wearing me out because they're so dim about those kind of things, and it just drives me nuts. But I knew you had been in some of those, and I think we had always been rolling our eyes at that kind of stuff. But
That,
was
what
just
you just
so
said about
funny.
unlimited hosting, though, is interesting because I've actually gone the other way. I don't want unlimited hosting
Yeah.
anymore because I feel like I need some restrictions on myself as far as what I
Yeah.
can produce. And I really need to think about, do I have a take here? And is that how I want to focus my time? Because if you just give me unlimited, like, I'm going to talk about everything that comes into my stupid head about any movie this month,
Right.
I think
Well,
you end up producing bad content. I do.
There are people that are like, well, I'm not really sure. Should I post one episode a week, or is it better to have a podcast bi-weekly? It's like, you decide that. Like,
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
That's not a known thing. Like, you just do what your show is.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Everybody's got their own idea about what their podcast should be and how it should work. And
But that's my point, is that no
right.
one else can tell you. So do
Yeah,
what
for
your
sure.
podcast is.
well, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the thing that I've had to come to terms with a lot here recently is just that, like, I've tried to explain. There's somebody the other day, Cody Pratt actually was asking me questions about podcasting, which was interesting. But anyways, that's a random name that people just might not have any context of. But somebody asked me the other day about, like, what a work week was like for you and I doing this stuff, the Sight and Sound stuff. I was trying to explain it to them, but I was also trying to explain it to them like, this is kind of you don't have to do all this stuff. You don't have to do YouTube. You don't have to do all this other stuff.
Right.
And they were just like, well, I don't even know where to start with even putting the show together. And I'm like, well, I'm bad to ask then, or at least with me as an example, or with our show as an example. But people just need to sit down and figure it out.
It's like,
at the end of the day,
If you and I went into that podcast group and was like, and asked the 15,000 people in the group that we're talking about, hey, what do you guys think about have different episode formats that exist on the same feed? People would be like, what the fuck is that? And it's like,
yeah,
but no, we do it every fucking week, and it works, and it makes sense for what we do.
Yeah.
But we'd have a million people say, that's not how podcasting works.
what did it in for me was
Because you host a podcast about the appearance of
Cheese.
people in wheelchairs in movies. It's like, it's a fucking something that can't be calculated.
so the thing that did it for me that just completely
It's an actual podcast.
made me leave the group. I don't think if I actually left. Yeah, I think I did. I left the group. It was when we were trying to just lodge this whole campaign for suggesting people to put their podcasts on YouTube,
Right.
that there are benefits to it, and just the backlash we got for it.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're not saying you have to do it. We're just saying there are benefits to it. Absolutely not. You're wasting your time. I'm just like,
And then we had a sidebar that was like, that guy is a fucking idiot.
yeah. Well, because we weren't saying to people,
Our
like,
approach was,
you
it's a why not thing. Why not put it on YouTube?
yeah, if you can do it, just then do it. It has its benefit. I don't know.
I think podcasters want that semblance of control, because some of the groups I'm in that have some really cool people, it's usually the ones that comment the most,
Yeah.
or like the quickest,
Yeah.
are the ones I want to scroll right past.
Yep.
They have this like security blanket of like, this has worked for me, so this has to work. Like I have
Right.
this, gold that I can give to you. And they're not really entertaining, because like the YouTube thing is something I never considered, because
Yeah.
for one, really, except for Sight and Sound, there's been one other podcast that I would occasionally consume on YouTube, because as soon as you tell me, hey, I've got a new show, I go open Overcast, I subscribe. That's how I do it. So that for me, that is what a podcast is, as far as it's my Overcast app.
And that's the primary.
Then I
way,
put it
yeah.
in like, whatever little subgroup, if I feel like listening to a movie podcast, what have you. But also having it on YouTube is a good reminder at times when there's
Right.
either extra content, or if it's just something that like it's going to get buried in my Overcast app. I subscribe to hundreds of podcasts. And so when you all appear on YouTube or something, that is just one gentle nudge. Like, oh, let me click to see if this is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our goal. That's always been our goal. Is it's just like, we are so aware, even though I was listening to somebody recently. It might have been Christian show on Collider, where they were talking about, no, it was that Kevin Pollak interview they did, where they were talking
Right.
about, oh, you guys have been around since the beginning of podcasting. 2012 was not the beginning of podcasting. 2011 was not the beginning of podcasting.
Well, I mean, podcasting's what, 12 years old now?
No. I mean,
Well, when did Serial come
Pretty
out? 'Cause
much.
That's when, that was the beginning of podcasting.
I remember when podcasting or podcasts were announced through Apple, and I was like,
Right.
this is really fucking cool. It was my senior year of high school in 2005 that I subscribed to my first ever podcast. It was
13.
Podtacular, which was a Halo podcast. And it just like completely went downhill. Like nobody gave a shit about it. And then all of a sudden it had this big resurgence. But people still don't know what it is. Like
Right.
that is an understatement. So we have listeners to Sight and Sound who are in our Facebook group that refuse to listen to our podcast on anything except for YouTube.
They only listen on
Yeah,
YouTube.
which is like bizarre to me, but I mean, I'm not going to tell them to stop. Like, it's just like, yeah, go for it. Stare at that, leave your screen open and stare at that picture.
Well, I was about to ask, are they like YouTube Red subscribers
I
or
don't
something? Because
know.
for me, that would be the
Just
killer.
it all varies.
Yeah.
I mean, like if we looked at the stats, YouTube Red is a portion
YouTube,
of what our revenue is.
the way people use YouTube is so bizarre. Like the way I use it is probably different from the way he uses it. And like I have a guy that I know, one of my really close friends is as into music as I am, but the primary way he listens to music is on YouTube. Like he just leaves his phone up all
so
day.
weird.
I know, it's like, but whatever. I mean, people just have strange habits.
Which is why it makes sense to put your podcast on as many channels as possible.
Yeah,
Going back
for
to
sure.
that original point.
Absolutely. You want to get into this Infinity War stuff?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's give the people what they want. So,
Michael, did you see the movie?
Yeah, I did. I saw it Thursday night. That was the first night,
Okay.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, Thursday
I
night.
saw it.
Wait, can I tell this story about what happened to me seeing the movie that you're aware of?
Sure.
So I was so hyped about this movie, like really, really looking forward to it. Been building up excitement. And I didn't get tickets on Thursday. I got tickets on Friday, which was great for me because I got to see it in IMAX. Not only did I pick the seats, but I got to pick the exact seats that I want. I've sat in this exact same seat for like the past 5 movies that I've been in. Anyways, so Friday night, 11:30 was my showtime, and I've been navigating the internet like the fucking minefield. And I mean, I've been like scrolling through Twitter like with my eyes half shut just to make sure I didn't get spoiled.
Eyes wide shut.
I had a
Christmas classic.
delicious dinner at TGI Fridays with my girlfriend right by the movie theater. I'm sitting there eating, excited, and I see my phone light up. Text messages. The first person I see in it is our Facebook group member, Anup, and I'm like, that's strange. Why is he sending a message to me? And then I see a few other people, and I'm like, what is going on? And I see a statement that says, "But how great was Thanos, though?" I had gotten pulled in to the spoiler chat, and I was like, I jumped in as quick as possible, and I was like, I haven't seen the movie.
Luke freaked the fuck out.
Oh my God.
All
After
caps.
I left,
Oh my God.
I seriously, when I realized what it was, I was like, ah! And, like, threw my phone.
So
When I left, or I got booted, thank God. But
right.
what happened after I left? All you motherfuckers out there.
It was Luke. Luke was just like, I can't believe it. And Up goes, it's okay, it happens. And I loved it. I was like,
Were they
I
upset about it?
wasn't even totally sure that you hadn't seen anything at that point.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if you can just say it's all right, it happens, because this kind of means a lot to people.
Yeah.
My experience with that. So I had just left work and I had to give an employee a ride home, and again, like you, I was just pulled into this group chat. So all of a sudden, bing, 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 all these text notifications, one after the other, start happening.
I hated group text, by the way.
The person sitting beside me in the car goes, your phone's getting blown up. Who is that? Your girlfriend?
Yes, you should have said yes, it is.
No, it's a stupid Infinity War spoiler chat. And then that's when I saw you in it, and I was like, oh, shit.
That's hilarious.
Because I knew that you weren't seeing it until 11 p.m.
30.
So this was really important to both of you, this movie, right?
It was, yeah. It was pretty...
And as you picked up on, we have completely different approaches. I've seen every Marvel movie the second it's come out. He's more casual. You haven't even seen the entire MCU?
I haven't seen every single...
Right.
Yeah,
so
Marvel film.
this is why I told you as soon as we all came together earlier today, I was so freaking excited to have this kind of conversation, because it's been a long time. It's been a long time since I've had a podcast discussion without knowing at all what your all's takes are. I haven't talked to you about anything.
Yeah, I haven't.
And I'm stoked.
I haven't posted much. The only thing I said on Twitter today was that watching the movie was like reading through Frank Ocean's credits on Blonde. It just has some ridiculous credits, like
I don't know.
All of the Beatles, alive and dead, are credited on the album. It's like, what does that even mean? Like, yeah.
I
think Barack Obama is credited on the album.
Steal that for show notes for sure.
We've done an Infinity War preview. Give us like Michael Deniston's preview, like when it came to expectation or excitement level. Like, where was your head at?
Well, okay, this is where I would get some hate. So, like, Tully is a movie that comes out next weekend with Charlize Theron, and like that's the one that I'm like really excited to see, and like not to like say like I wasn't excited to see.
Were you
Infinity
a big Gringo
War.
fan? Did you see her in Gringo?
I did not see Gringo. No, it's more like the Reitman Diablo Cody pairing, because that like young adult is like one of my favorite movies.
Big Juno fan.
I like Juno more than like. That's one of those things I think it's like Little Miss Sunshine. That was like, it was really like cool then, and then it like immediately was hated.
This like wave of like
there was a huge backlash, and then it
films,
never sort of left.
Right.
But no, I love Juno because I love Bateman in that, because he is such a like realistic sort of creepy
That was the big
asshole. He's awesome.
That was like the beginning of the Bateman renaissance post Arrested Development, because he kind of went away for a little bit after Arrested Development.
So yeah, Tully is my Infinity War for the summer, but that is not to be dismissive. Like, I understand.
Does it at least hit your radar? Like, this is something that's unavoidable to.
Yeah, I mean, I went out my way to like, as soon as tickets were made available, I get the alert on my phone. I was checking like, because it's the same thing with like the Star Wars stuff with like my wife. I'm like, all right, this is gonna be like.
Are you a big Star Wars fan?
Not now. No, I wouldn't.
Okay.
I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan now. Like, but that's not. That's not.
Is that because The Last Jedi was trash?
I loved Last Jedi actually.
Yes,
I loved it.
Yes,
that is the only like Star Wars movie since like the original that I've like had a really like strong like reaction to, like in a good way. I was about to say that's nothing against like Force Awakens, which I enjoyed, or really anything they've done. It's just like the concept of having a Star Wars movie every year for me. is like
I get
not,
it.
it's not cool. Like
I get it.
I liked growing up when it was like the prequels always might be made, and then
Wanted
when
to feel special.
Then when
yeah.
they came around, it's like, isn't this awesome? So maybe for me, Star Wars is just like an every 20-year thing.
Yeah, it's so
Maybe.
bizarre that we're
Yeah.
getting a Star Wars
It is.
movie.
There's like gonna be
soon.
like James Bond. Like it's just gonna be something that will outlive us. That
Right.
bothers me a little bit. But for Infinity War, like I understood the culmination of 10 years. So I was kind of excited, but I also went in like as someone who didn't like Civil War, didn't like Age of Ultron, where I'm like, well, the group movies aren't for me. But like,
So are you going to see
The more I watch Civil War, by the way, the less I like it.
well, that makes up for Age of Ultron. I guess the more you watch it, the more you do like
Yeah.
it.
That movie ends after the airport scene for me. Go ahead.
Ryan's
God,
upset.
that hurts my brain.
It was also my favorite movie that year. But anyways, go ahead.
Does Michael Dennison go to see Infinity War because he feels obligated to talk about it on movie podcasts? Like, is that where
Oh
your head is?
no, because we didn't do an episode for Civil War for War Machine versus War
Mhm.
Horse because I didn't really enjoy that, and
Yeah.
so I went into this one thinking that I probably won't enjoy it because I really loved Homecoming, which I didn't expect to, and Thor Ragnarok I dug, and Black Panther. So it's like they've been on a streak, but I was like, maybe I just like the solo movies.
What'd you
Maybe
think
the
of
big
Guardians too.
I didn't care for it.
Yeah, me either.
Me neither.
I turned it off.
Mainly, I don't like when you have this cool team and they're like, hey, 3 years later or whatever, we're gonna make a sequel and let's keep them separate the whole time. I didn't. The sort of touchy feely stuff at the end that a lot of people dug, I found kind of awkward.
Everything about that movie took what worked in Guardians and just turned it up to an 11. And
the
didn't
humor,
want
yeah, it was a
Yeah.
little much.
that. Everything
It was
about
the first time I thought, wow, I do not want a joke there. When Star-Lord and Ego are fighting and they do that like Dragon Ball Z where they're flying at
Yep,
each
yep.
other, and it's
I
an
don't
epic
even remember that. I think I
It's
turned
at the
it off
very
before
end.
that. Yeah.
it's an epic moment between father and son. Like they're going crazy because he just found out. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. You're listening to this because you saw Infinity War, you saw Guardians 2,
It's a spoiler for me, but whatever. Go ahead.
but you don't care.
No.
So Star-Lord just finds out that Ego is just a guy that uses women on different planets,
Right.
his mom being one of them, and he knows that he just gives them cancer. So he was the reason why she
I know
died.
that. Yeah, I knew
Okay.
that.
So they're fighting. It's an ultimate moment. And as they're coming together, for the sake of a Star-Lord pop culture reference, Star-Lord morphs into Pac-Man and an Ego and Pac-Man. And I was so pissed at that. And I finally just said, I do not want a joke there. I was like, that is enough.
Right.
And I love the first Guardians, but I never once
Same.
thought, do not do that there. I don't, it's not that it's not funny. It's like, I just don't want a joke there at all. And that's when I just decided I did not care for that movie.
Yeah.
Anyway, Michael Dennison.
No, I don't feel obligated to watch it to be a part of like the conversation on podcasts or just in general. But there's still that itch that needs to be scratched from like my comic book like collecting days where I'm like, hey, this is this will be cool to see those characters
Right.
interact. So I was mildly excited about it, given that I didn't like the previous big group movies. Yeah.
Maybe you're curious about Thanos as well. Sort of that.
No,
You're
not at
not
all.
curious about
No,
that?
nah.
Well, I figured if you were a comic book fan, I mean,
No, the villains like
Thanos
so
in
rarely
general was
work
never
for me.
that big of a villain for me. Obviously, Infinity War, the comic book,
Yeah,
was
yeah,
before my time.
Yeah,
so
same here.
I was never big on Thanos.
It's like my favorite Marvel character is Daredevil. So like that, even in the comics world,
Yeah.
the big like operatic space sagas, I was more the
sure,
street
more
level.
you weren't
grounded,
a
yeah.
cosmic level. guy.
No. So, but Marvel has been on a streak with me also with the villains too, because I loved Keaton.
Sure.
And
Yes.
I love him taking Spider-Man to like the dance. I love that. The way
That's
they
a great scene.
they
that whole
blur
sequence.
that line because he's villainous as the father figure and also as an actual villain. I love that. And Michael B. Jordan I love anyway. So Black
Absolutely.
Panther.
Friday Night Lights.
So yeah, but no, it wasn't Thanos because I was like, whatever. I just want to see Spider-Man hanging out with all these people and
Mhm.
Star-Lord.
Right.
So I thought it would be cool. I did warn my wife though, because like for Force Awakens, she was like, "Oh, that's cool, a new Star Wars movie." And then she got there and like when the people like were applauding, like Lucasfilm and stuff. She was like,
She didn't get
not
that.
about it.
no, not only did she not get it, but she like looked at me like,
Was it cringy for
I
her?
don't think I want to watch this with these people.
I get that.
And so she was kind of prepared for that. Like she just went through it with Last Jedi,
Right.
Black Panther to a certain extent, and so she wasn't. I gave her the aisle seat just so she could
Right.
be around like one
That's
less
where I sit,
person.
yeah.
So
That's where I sit so I can vape in the theater. Anyways, go ahead. Continue.
With what?
Where are we going?
I was
The
mildly excited.
The
so, yeah.
progression of the podcast, you mean?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I was just gonna ask who's going first.
I'll just start with this. I was shocked by this movie, the fact that it literally begins with where most movies start or where most movies like have a climax. I mean,
Sure.
it begins with not only the death and destruction of the ending of a whole other
Of
movie.
Asgard.
Yeah, of a whole other movie. But in that one scene,
Asgardians, I should say.
in that one scene alone, the opening scene, for me at least, I got everything that I needed to know about how threatening this villain was going to be.
Yeah.
And how ruthless it was going to be. I will say, if I'm just gonna, because Michael Dennison is here, and I want to throw out some nitpicks about the movie. I want to say
Nitpicks are allowed in my presence.
Exactly.
Okay.
I will say the opening scene I thought was like heavy-handed in the sense where it was like, oh, you wanted some steaks? We'll show you some steaks. Fuck off him, doll. Just like stabbed him in the but he also has no point in being in the movie at all anymore.
I don't agree with that. Only because
Of course you don't.
Well, only because we all had decided, we didn't know that that's where the movie was going to go based
Right.
on what we saw in Ragnarok, and it just made the most sense. But my one prediction when it came to who was going to die, it wasn't for me as much about who was, as far as the heroes go. Like, I wasn't hell bent on the idea of Cap dying necessarily. It was more about, if you're going to convince me that Thanos is the biggest bad, the best villain ever, he has to kill the biggest bad that preceded him.
Well, so much was accomplished.
It was very satisfying, but it was also I thought there was a lot of weight behind him just taking out Loki in that way. And
But-
of course, adding in the idea of, building off of his relationship with Thor, like having seen it, I was like, that's the part I didn't imagine, and that's what kind of helped, that raised it a little bit.
He also defeated the Hulk
Yes.
in that scene, which is also, I mean,
Bruce Banner was impotent for the rest of the movie based on
Right.
that experience.
right.
Do you buy into that? Like, do you like that? Because
I didn't get it.
I feel like,
I didn't
okay,
get it.
you're removing the Hulk because there's no massive Lord of the Rings fight scene if the Hulk is the Hulk there.
I legitimately think that that's the sole purpose of not having him not included. It's an interesting angle, just that because the Hulk has never been defeated like that, especially as an adolescent personality, because that's sort of what we got in Ragnarok, that he was like a baby back in Avengers days, and he's aged a little bit, but he's still very adolescent.
Yeah.
That him having the shit beat out of him, he's like, I don't want any part of this anymore. So I thought that was interesting, but I agree, like, you're basically taking out a chess piece.
Yeah.
I think I buy it in the sense that the MCU for the past 3 or 4 since Avengers has really been experimenting with how we interpret the Hulk, just based on the idea that, going back to that at the end of Avengers where he decides he's always angry and he can just at his own will change it to the Hulk. And then giving him a voice, like having him actually speak in Ragnarok. And not that we haven't seen it in the comics, but I mean, I might be wrong, but I didn't know that that's how Hulk would ultimately be interpreted based on what we got from Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
So they continue to kind of add things to the Hulk over time. And so I guess in that sense, it's consistent to the MCU, but I guess I just didn't buy it in the context of the film, because it's like, wait a minute. But also, you didn't have to have talking about that unfair chess piece, if you will, that the Hulk brings to any fight scene. It's like you could have put him on Titan, and he could have been fighting Thanos. You could have just given a villain that equates to the power of the Hulk, and then it would have been that big of a deal.
Let me throw this out there. I could save this towards the very end, but I want to make sure that I don't forget it. Watching a movie like this really makes me realize how shitty having Superman in a universe is. Because Superman is such an easy... I keep snapping my fingers because I've got Thanos in the back of my mind. But having Superman in a situation in a movie is just like such an easy fix, I think. And,
Sure.
And by not having that individual, I mean, I think Thor would be the closest thing to that in this movie. But the Hulk could have also been in that conversation. And yeah, because the Hulk wasn't there, obviously it just lends to the despair that you feel throughout the entire movie.
But the difference with that, I think, is that Superman to me is an eye candy. When Superman is Superman,
Yeah,
I don't get thrills out of it. Where I get thrills seeing the Hulk be the Hulk. So
well, yeah.
even if the Hulk was that unfair chess piece and we actually saw him play ball,
It's not like you can
I would have
he can't
I would have
fly,
been excited, and it's different in that sense. But I get what you're saying. It does make the storytelling less interesting,
but- right.
but it pleases the audience more, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
I think I was surprised because I thought the movie surprised me the most because I thought it was going to be action. I thought we were going to be
It felt that
moving.
way in the first probably 30 minutes of the
And
movie.
It felt like in the way that Harry Potter in its climax became one of the most toned down, like
Right.
slow moving movies to me. I was surprised by that a little bit. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the movie felt slow at times. Not that I had a problem with it necessarily, but the tone in those aspects really, really, really surprised me because I thought Wakanda was going to start like midway through the second act,
Yeah.
and we were going to get moving on that battle sequence, and so it kind of felt like a Harry Potter climax, and it felt like sort of a Lord of the Rings movie in that way, where we were watching sort of more of a journey, and I didn't have that in my head going into it.
Now, have you seen it just once, or have you seen it
Once.
just once? Okay, that surprises me because I thought,
Oh, I'm definitely going to see it more. I
Yeah,
just
I'm
haven't
gonna see it
gotten to
again,
yet.
but yeah.
like, I
just
feel
saw
like
it.
I'll have a different reaction to it. Not like my opinion will change, like for good or bad, but I do feel like it's a big event movie in a good sense in that it is so overwhelming that there's so many characters and there's so many
Yeah.
different, sort of arcs that they're going on, especially with like Iron Man. I feel like this is a better version of what they were trying to get at with Civil War with Captain America and him, like
Yeah.
their relationship as Captain America is very unquestioning about things that are happening to him. He's just like, well, I show up because that's what I do. Like, I have to show up. That's the
Yeah.
type of man I am. And Iron Man is constantly trying to figure out when he can quit. Like, if I just do this one thing,
Right.
Well,
can I
go-
fix it all?
It goes back to that argument in Avengers on the helicarrier. Cap says to him, "I don't think you would lay your life down on the line or on the wire," is what he says, and Iron Man just says, "I think I would just cut the wire," as opposed to, I mean, that's everything that those two.
But I think
characters
like
are.
Marvel's not. I don't think for me Marvel movies are very good when they try to verbalize those things because that's
I think
one of the
you're
issues
right.
I had
agree
with
that.
Civil War all the time was you have a character like you have a grieving mom that is like comes up to like Tony Stark and is like you're responsible, and I'm like, well, there's some nuance to this argument without just being like you're a horrible person and I think you do bad, because it's like, well, you do a lot of good,
They kind of just present the situation to you.
and it's like, yes, that is
Yeah.
a bad thing,
Right.
but here I think just what you're saying, just throwing them in the mix where it's
Yeah.
like, hey, here's the end of another movie. We're
Right.
already in this situation. I like that better. I like seeing Tony Stark trying to work it out as other shit is going on, as opposed to having a first act where he's making his PowerPoint presentation
Yeah.
to the Avengers. Like, here's my stance. Here's my philosophy on how to handle this. Because that's where you get bogged down, especially with Civil War coming out after 2 months after Batman versus Superman.
Yeah.
That really I think added to my annoyance with that fucking movie, because I was
Really?
because I felt like both of them are like, God, I don't read comic books to be lectured all the it's like the
Mm,
it's like
I
the
get that. I see
for
that.
both movies. I felt like it was like Professor X and Magneto having one long conversation on how to approach a comic book movie, and I'm like, just shut up. One of you do something already. Just show me Spider-Man
Right.
cracking jokes and punching someone. Like that's Rampage. I told you, I'm gonna bring up Rampage so many times. The problem with Rampage is that they try to explain this idea of a giant lizard and a giant rat eating and attacking people, and I'm like,
a wolf.
is it a wolf?
It's a wolf.
Yeah.
Oh, it's got wings. And, it's some sort of
Genetic editing. You didn't watch the movie.
dude. I watched that, and that's like every time we cut to the dude from The Office and his like sister, I'm like, I don't care how you set up this, like what business reason. This was a video game in
What
the
guy from
80s.
Office? Who is it in The Office? It's in that movie.
He's from like, the last two seasons. Lacey, is that his name? Is that the actor's name? He's gonna be How to Be Single. Great romantic.
I don't
comedy.
Are you
know.
talking? Wait, who are you talking about?
In Rampage, not in.
Is that Malin Ackerman's brother?
Yeah.
Who was it?
He came in like the last two seasons of The Office, and I think didn't he compete with Ed Helms for the affection of like the receptionist?
I
felt
can't
like-
remember who it is. Wow, you're blowing my mind. I can't remember who it is.
Yeah, I don't know who it is either. But
See, I'm apparently the layman in The Office here. I'm not trying to shake
Well,
the
those are, like,
foundations of the.
those
like,
are
The
literally
Office
the worst
mythology.
two seasons.
Those are
of
the two
Office.
seasons that I don't think exist.
Okay.
So
But regardless, so with all that being said, this movie does get straight to it. In fact, that's something.
Move forward.
Yeah,
They're always moving forward.
It was actually pretty shocking to me. Even like, for instance, when the Hulk Bruce Banner crashes down into Stephen Strange's place or
the
whatever,
Sanctum.
and we get Iron Man there. I was fully expecting like this whole big, expository scene and we got it for like a split second, and it was almost instant. Like there was no like, there's a ship coming, it's approaching. Like they literally just went out and had I actually think that New York City battle with Wong, Strange, Iron Man,
The Black Order.
and the Black Order and Spider-Man, that I think that might have been my favorite fight scene, because that's before you realize that, man, I don't know how they're going to win this yet. They feel beatable then, and I was just like fist bumping through that whole
Sure.
sequence.
And that goes back to the point that the New Yorker guy made. It's like
And I felt like
they know you're there because you've spent all this time with these characters. So
I
they're
fe-
just speeding through all that.
I feel like they somehow, some way made New York feel different too, right? We've talked about how we're over New York.
The reason why
We're over it in the MCU. I'm over it in the Marvel TV shows.
it was entirely how they filmed it, because
Yeah.
I realized this in the battle scene at Wakanda. It was entirely because of how it was filmed. When we see New York in the Avengers, it's almost entirely aerial, except for that one street that they focus in on in that fight
Russo
scene.
brothers love being on the
And-
ground, don't they?
And that scene, especially when you are following with Tony Stark and they meet the Black Order in the street, it's all ground level. It's a continuous shot that's
Mhm.
following him. That changed everything. And even in that battle scene, every Avengers movie, they're all fighting putties. That's
Yeah.
just the reality. When it comes to a team up movie, you're gonna have a bunch of disposable bad guys. You
Sure.
don't even know who they are. They're gonna be mindless
Yeah.
people. It's just that's how it has to be. And it was based purely on the fact that they approached that as an actual war. You have two sides that are lined up like a Troy, like a gladiator movie.
Are you still talking
and
about
you were-
in the New York scene?
Wakanda?
Okay.
That's
See,
what
the Wakanda scene was by far my least favorite
Well,
fight scene in the whole movie.
well, I'm just saying that's my main point.
But I
is
get
that
what you're
if
saying.
you're worried about having fight
it felt like
scenes-
Battle of the Bastards. It felt like
yes, exactly. They had a gladiator approach as opposed to like I don't think Age of Ultron does that necessarily, and the first Avengers certainly doesn't, because again that whole fight is mostly aerial. So, just filming that changed it. So even though it is similar to the previous Avengers movies, it doesn't feel that way because of that different filmmaking approach.
It definitely feels it felt like something I'd never seen before. There were times, like I just said, it felt like I was watching Lord of the Rings, both in how some of the Black Order people looked. I was like, these legitimately look like dark elves from
Sure.
Lord of the Rings. It felt like Two Towers at times. It felt like Guardians at times, or not Guardians. It did feel like Guardians, but it also felt like Game of Thrones. But there were times when they were doing cosmic stuff that I was like, man, even with Guardians, this just looks and feels so different to me that I just enjoyed it. I just really, really enjoyed seeing all this new stuff, even though there was so much that seemed so familiar about it.
For me, what's weird though is that some of the criticism I'm seeing either from someone who's like, I didn't read this New Yorker article, but someone
I
who's
didn't read it either. I saw an asinine headline.
someone who's
Don't.
not a fan or is not speaking from, the fan community versus some of the reactions I've seen, which I guess we'll talk about more later because my crowd was not that receptive to the ending. Like,
Oh,
which I found
I can't wait to talk about that.
I found strange. But there's this weird thing about how you have to guide audiences along. Like with Thanos, it's been 10 years building him up as this is a thing we can't have happen, but we want it to happen because we want to see it on screen. And so your point about them looking like dark elves, I think there's something where it's like, okay, we know that we don't have time to set up who the henchmen are necessarily, but they just have to.
I would have liked to know more about them.
They just have to have a look and sort of just, they are the stand-in for hell has finally opened up here.
Right.
And I do think there was a little bit of a difference, maybe not in the Wakanda sequence. So I think it's interesting that you didn't like it. Like I did feel like that battle felt more like the first Avengers, where it's like just unleash the orcs, goblins, aliens, what have you. We don't care, but it's just an excuse for Captain America to run into battle.
Right.
I think that opening sequence with Doctor Strange though is very different. But and honestly, I as far as stakes go, I didn't really know what to expect as far as like what is disposable IP here? Is any of this IP disposable to Marvel? Like, is Doctor Strange successful enough to where, it's guaranteed that we actually need this version of the character, or could he just be he be killed
Obviously,
off?
it's Black Panther, right? Disposable IP. They don't need to make another Black Panther movie, right?
I think the market has spoken on that.
I just need to say this one thing so that I don't forget it. And I'm sure we'll get to it. Obviously, we will. When they were floating away, disintegrating as dust.
Did we mention spoilers? Is that a given?
When they were doing that at
He didn't
the
say
end,
who, just they.
when they were panning across the different people, and they waited on T'Challa.
Yeah.
When it finally got to T'Challa, somebody next to me says, "Oh hell no!" They were like, they just walked out immediately.
They walked
They
out?
were like, "No, no."
Are you kidding me?
Swear.
They left?
I swear,
Holy
I saw somebody leave.
shit.
I saw somebody leave in the middle of it.
That's
There was a person sitting
fucking
next to
nuts.
us that had like a vocal thing. They were just like, "Oh no."
Because
No.
those people don't know Avengers 4 exists.
Well,
They don't know.
But are they having a more genuine experience than we are though?
I wish I had an experience that was that emotional.
Well, I mean,
I will say this: where Marvel got a little too inside baseball for their own good was that post-credit scene, because there were so many people that was like,
Right.
What
does that
is
mean?
that? Yeah,
Right.
like I was having to explain it to somebody, and they were still like,
See, I don't have an issue with that because I think
I don't have an issue with
the
it
post credit is fine to be inside baseball.
I agree
If it's
100%.
like the final scene, I think maybe you should appeal more. But
I mean,
post credit,
I would argue that most of them are like that. Honestly. I
Howard
mean,
the Duck.
I think an
Howard the Duck, yeah,
easy
in
post
particular.
credit sequence was when Spider-Man at the end of Civil War, and Spider-Man's like looking at the hologram that his gadgets.
Even I didn't
like,
know what that
that's
was. But
that's just kind of a nothing thing. Other
Yeah.
than just assume Spider-Man for the first time has a high tech suit.
right.
Like that's all that is. Like you don't have it telegraphs.
I mean, I
that
think
for
the
you.
best one that rides the line there is probably just the first one, Iron Man, with Nick Fury, which I'm
Yeah.
sure most people
Yeah.
didn't know who the fuck Nick Fury was or Shield or what he's trying to assemble with this
Right.
Avengers, but they know it's Sam Jackson, and they're like, "Oh, that's really cool. Sam Jackson's in this like
Yeah.
little 5-second thing." But
How different? We literally went from like the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. We'll
Right.
get back to it.
well,
but
you did, sir.
I
You
did. I apologize. How different?
He's not a good podcast.
Or maybe I'm great because people. If we're going where the conversation takes us.
Don't let me distract you.
And really,
Just go.
nothing else of importance happened in the movie.
That's
other than
right.
Doctor Strange fight
Pretty
on the
much.
street,
That's why I
yeah.
hated it. No, I'm just kidding. The how different of a movie is it without that post credit scene? Just no hope. I mean, like walking out of it.
Oh yeah. 'Cause
Man, I love the
post-credit scene-
credits. I love that there's no mid credit thing, and I
Yeah.
love that it just goes to black, and it's just
And the post is essentially a continuation of what we just saw, which is a little bit different. Than
If you
usual.
don't see that ounce of hope, like I mean,
what was the first thing you thought of? Did you think of The Leftovers?
with that
Like,
whole sequence.
when the helicopter crashes into the building, the car crash. All that.
Well, yeah, that
It's
and
like, yeah.
that and because Nora's in the film, but
That's true.
also just That whole sequence, if I'm being completely honest, I could have never predicted that in a million years.
I know.
I just thought it was powerful. Okay, let's go back to
Let's go
other
back.
parts of the movie.
So you were talking about Doctor Strange. I think Doctor Strange, this movie telegraphs how important his character is going to end up being. When you were talking about disposable IP, and
Maybe I'm just speaking for myself because I didn't. Doctor Strange.
well,
I was just like,
I'm not acting like I'm. Deeply
I hated Doctor Strange in the comics.
I'm
I
not
despised
acting
him.
like I'm deeply connected to him as a character yet. I mean, I really enjoyed him here, and it helps me enjoy the first movie a little bit more. The first movie was just kind of forgettable for me. I recently rewatched it and felt a little bit better about it, but it's not like I'm really impassioned. But I think Phase 4 is going to hinge on him a lot, especially with his abilities and everything that they're doing with the astral plane and cosmic. They're getting bigger, and that's the bigger character in that sense. But
He had so much to do in the movie.
he did. And talking about Doctor Strange and meeting those characters for the first time, I really, really enjoyed, just like every Avengers movie, I think they have some really, really great pairings. And I thought that was really, really great. I was surprised that Black Panther ended up being the character that didn't have... Black Panther just didn't play as big of a role as I thought he was going to play.
it felt like they didn't expect
Right.
the receipts they got when they released the film in February, which is it's fine because I mean, you know, his movie's his thing, and they're certainly going to give you more of it. I'm sure. With
But
the
to be
trilogy.
fair, they knew what they have with Spider-Man, and Spider-Man met the same fate. So
you're talking about the end result. I do think Spider-Man gets more play as far as a likable
yeah.
presence in the film
yeah.
than Black Panther.
Yeah.
Well, there were a
fate,
few.
yeah.
There were a few characters throughout the entire movie, and I think it honestly comes down to let's be realistic about what they can even achieve. I mean, I didn't foresee Black Panther playing that big of a role in a cosmic sort of thing. Anyways, I wouldn't say that about the only thing that Spider-Man brings to the table is one, he has a tech suit, but also he can shoot webs and swing around. But Captain America was essentially, for me, missing through most of the movie, which I'm whatever about that. However, they utilized him great in that in the subway train sequence when he shows up. I mean, such a great moment. I was fist pumping.
Yes.
Super
was
excited. Vision in this movie, I don't understand. I had the same problem with him in this movie that I had with Spider-Man and Spider-Man Homecoming, is that he was constantly getting his ass kicked through this whole movie. And I was just like, didn't he save the day in Ultron? Like,
He killed Ultron.
why is he such a fucking cock in this movie? Like, step up, guy.
And he was a newborn sentient being
Exactly.
in Ultron. And
Isn't he supposed to be way better now?
I didn't really dig him being like a chase object. Like, 'cause
Yes, he was a
just
plot
he's
device.
just the stone. He's not
He
really
was just a plot
They
device.
have the little bit of the romance, but I'm not like a huge Vision guy from the comics.
Yeah, me neither.
But I am what little I do know. I'm like, I think he's a little bit more powerful than that. I feel like
the only argument I've seen
He's
for
the only person that can lift Thor's hammer other than Thor.
exactly the only argument I've seen for this whole thing was that basically he got stabbed in the back and was weakened from the second
Right.
he even started fighting. So I guess I kind of get that.
Yeah.
But
I think when it comes to maybe some criticism, I think the only thing that bothered me, and I'm not sure that it like doesn't make me despise it by any means, but
you hate the movie.
it came down to, unfortunately, because of the task at hand, because this was such a monumental feat, there were tremendous gaps where we didn't see particular characters. Like, I genuinely was sitting there watching what was going on between Guardians of Thor and Thanos and bouncing back and forth, and I thought to myself, I haven't seen Tony Stark and Spider-Man on the wheel in forever.
Right.
Like, I think maybe 20 minutes might have gone by before they bounced back to that. And then so much time had passed, we get back to them, and they're at like the precise moment they were the last time we saw them.
Did it
That-
surprise you all how much time we spent with certain characters though? Like, if I were to say who did the movie focus on the most, who would you all say character wise?
Thor and the Guardians.
I would say Thor.
That
he has
that
the
shocked me. Like, legitimately surprised me.
side quest just to to go to the forge again. I think some of my buddies have complained about that.
Were you on board with it?
I actually kind of dug it. Like,
I did too.
I mean, I thought it was like, it makes it more like it's like Excalibur or something. It's like more of a classic sort of tale that way.
What a comeback kid story for Thor.
I was gonna say,
to go from the two movies that people were just like, what? I didn't even see them. That's how much of a throwaway I was like on Thor, to Ragnarok being one of my favorite MCU movies now.
Yeah.
And everybody was talking about, oh, Thor's going to eat it first in this movie.
Did they?
There were a lot of people because
know that.
Because of the scene.
Because Thanos has his head.
A lot of people
Sure.
were like, oh,
Okay.
well. So that was shocking to me. And then just with Guardians, just because they seemed so removed from everybody. And it was crazy. It also seems like the Russos just wanted to have a lot of fun with those characters too.
I think they did too. I mean, I think they captured more of what I loved with the Guardians, but
it felt more like Guardians 1.
It did, but but what they were able to do with Gamora in this movie, because I don't know if Gamora is ever the character that I've been attached to. I'm not saying that they haven't serviced her character well, but I didn't realize how big of a fan I was of Gamora. And adding in that element, we knew that was going to happen. Obviously, they have that connection, and Thanos being the big bad. We knew that they were going to play with that a little bit, but I was surprised how much she moved me throughout the movie, especially, and we'll get to that moment when, I want to talk about Thanos for sure, but it felt more like Guardians 1, but like +1, if you will, with that kind of stuff.
It felt like an evolution, yeah.
And going back to the, the team ups, I loved seeing Rocket and Thor and all that Sweet Rabbit stuff. I loved all that.
Why?
Was so great.
I laughed every time he said that. Like that joke didn't go
that too. My wife hated it. Hated every time I laughed at it too. I felt the judgment.
You know which Guardian was absolutely nothing?
Drax.
Actually, there's two.
Drax and what's her name?
Groot.
What? I completely disagree.
Groot did nothing in this movie.
He did one very big important thing.
Okay, but it's like
picked up your shit, man.
He didn't do.
That's what makes him feel like a plot point. It's like he was in the background until that one moment.
But see, I think that plays into his character at this point in time. The fact that he is this angsty teen.
Absolutely.
He's teen Groot, and
it's just
he's
uninteresting.
got an even better reason to be angsty. I mean, he's already sacrificed himself before.
It's a new Groot.
Isn't it? See, I don't like that. If it's a totally new Groot with no memory of anything, because I read it like this dude's like, fuck you all. Like, I saved your life once. I'm gonna sit here and play video games. He's a totally new character.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I like the
sucks. Then.
I like the fact that he wasn't doing anything, and that. So, imagine. Well, not imagine. We won't go into this, but I think it's cool that Groot can only really communicate with Rocket for most of his life.
Yeah,
and then Thor shows up and he can communicate with him, so they have this attachment. And then in that moment, when he finally decides I'm going to get my head out of Space Invaders, and
on the surface, it's a funny idea to make him sort of a teenager, if you will, who's stuck on his screen or whatever. but it's so uninteresting, and it forces him to be in the background with all this other stuff going on. It's like it's just not. It wasn't ideal. Like, if he was that way in Guardians 3, and that's when we saw it, it's like it might make more sense there because you could probably play on that more comedically. But when you do that in the Avengers movie, it's just he becomes a background character and that gets played out. And it's just...
yeah, I mean, that's cool. I just didn't have
I just disagree with you.
Well, I just didn't have that experience, especially tonally, because everything with Guardians and Thor always had like some comedic spice to it. So,
were you going to say Nebula when I said there were two?
I was, yeah.
I didn't even count her.
Yeah,
I think I was disappointed in Bucky. I think the Bucky stuff, especially the end of Black Panther, I thought there'd be more.
Bucky's my favorite.
More
character.
of a relationship being there, like being he has that one sort of throwaway line like I love this place or whatever. But I didn't really I didn't feel any sort of attachment really, and I don't know. I've only seen it once, but I'm trying to think was there one cool thing you did? I guess with Rocket.
Yeah, that was like
when he picks up
only main cool thing. I will say this:
he just shoots a gun. I mean, that's what he does in the movie, honestly.
Which is strange. He never even really used his arm. Like, you know what I'm saying? Both times the Russos have used the Winter Soldier, he's doing really cool stuff with his arm. Like even if it's just like holding it up to block bullets.
I was gonna say they could have done some really. Think of the tech that Shuri has, because she essentially has what Iron Man has, but with vibranium.
Give him
they
a
made
suit.
it a point to give him a vibranium arm. What if he had an Iron Man or a Shuri arm? I guess I should say that'd be dope as shit.
Well, I will say it's like they made the movie just to shove a fucking dagger in my heart because I love the Winter Soldier. I love Bucky.
Right.
And when he was like the first one to turn
That's
to
the only
dust,
one I
was
believe.
like,
That's the one I actually bought when it happened. I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we are in full spoilers, right? Like,
Yeah,
anyone listening.
100%.
So
we'll explain that.
okay. That happens. I was like, shit, that's a cold way to get rid of him. But since it's Bucky, I'm like, well, maybe his arc is done. I guess this could be his end. And then, 10 seconds later, it's Black Panther. I'm like, oh, this is all horseshit. This will be fixed.
I mean, him being the first to go in that way, that still moved me because I still have plenty of context for that character.
Well, especially
so to see him fall,
especially to see
and say Cap,
exactly, yeah,
and then Cap run to him, and I was like, wow, that was also obviously the first time we saw that unfold because I was like going back to what you said, I didn't even know that could happen, and I mean that was a pretty profound moment.
I think it works specifically with his character because there's been so much made about him.
A lot as far as pivotal,
as far as like friendships dying, different like countries vying just to have control of him, and to just see someone snap their fingers and be like, it's just roll the dice, he's worthless, was interesting. But that's what I was talking about. That's why I asked earlier: are people having a more genuine experience by being ignorant to the business side of it or the process? Where there, of course, will be another Black Panther movie with this actor. As soon as they did that, it did take me out of the movie for a second where I'm like, oh, okay, everything's fine now.
I think even so, there's still a lot of unanswered questions in terms of like, well, I think the way that they kind of solved that puzzle for me, at least, was just still by making Thanos so unbeatable. Like, I know a little bit about Captain Marvel, but I do know for a fact that she can't beat him alone.
Right.
Like, so it's just like, I still don't know how this is going to work. So I think they did a good job in that regard.
Let's talk about Thanos. Because not only was I satisfied that he killed Loki, because I wanted that to happen, but I was shocked at how true to their word the Russos were when they said that this was going to be a Thanos movie. And I thought he was awesome. I thought
best MCU villain?
Yeah.
Probably. I think so. Who do you think is yours?
I'm gonna go with Michael B. Jordan,
Okay,
Black Panther.
That's fair enough.
Because I actually kind of agree with him. Like, I don't know if Thanos ever makes the. He tries, and they do their damnedest to make his argument. Like, I like this idea of this version of Thanos where he's a guy that just has to do the tough assignment, the job, and he desperately wants to retire from it. And it's just like this, like, he is the cop from all those terrible movies where it's like 2 days from retirement. Please just let me accomplish this. Get out of my way.
He's what's his name from Training Day?
Yeah,
actually, Washington.
Maybe a little toned down. Shockingly,
well, I think
more purple, less black.
If you go to the comic book version of Thanos, from what I know, it's the fact that he's just obsessed with death and power.
It's like
ultimately.
his mistress,
And I think if you had brought that into the movie, you would have made him feel like just any other standard villain who, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So not that he's not interesting in the comics. I don't have the knowledge of that.
They
But
did a good job at developing a motivation for him. I thought.
And so spending time with him in the flashbacks, seeing him with Gamora, I thought all of that was firing on all cylinders. And I think I have a bias when I answered your question. I do think he's the best villain only because, like, it's the one villain that we've gotten the movie for. Killmonger is obviously the close second because I think they share the screen in that sense.
Yeah.
See, I rank Vulture over Killmonger.
Vulture's a good one too.
Vulture's my number 2.
Yeah.
So.
I just think everything Thanos was really, really good.
I have a little bit of a hard. It's a hard sell. I think it's a hard ask for the audience when you've built up. Mainly, it's all the post-credit shit with Thanos, where he's sort of a smiling jackass who seems maniacal. Like, I just want this and I will have it. Do my bidding. Fine, I'll do it myself. It is a little bit.
That's not a good scene. Yeah,
but it's a course correction in a way here where you're like, at first I was like, oh shit, he's actually kind of thoughtful about what he's doing, in as much as I guess you can be thoughtful about randomly killing half of humanity. But I wondered if general audiences watching this were thinking like, hey, isn't he just the big bad guy? Like, why are we spending this much time with him? And it's interesting seeing some of the reaction. I think that has been some of the negative feedback. Like, I don't think it's anything like Last Jedi level, but I do think some of it has been a little bit like with that, and with, in some regard, them letting him win. I mean, he at this point he has won.
Right.
He's accomplished what he wanted to accomplish.
I think part of that is on Marvel a little bit for having so many disposable villains in general. Like,
that's a good point.
You've never had a
You
reason.
taught your audience.
Yeah, you never really had a reason to really care. So going into it, to spend this much time with somebody and be like, well, you need to care about this guy. I get it that he's been off in the distance, always alluded to, but I get where people could be wary about it. I mean, obviously, I'm a big fan of these movies, so
I think
on board.
I think the only thing that disappointed me when it comes to Thanos, or maybe the Infinity Stones in general, I think it sort of had the issue that Inception has, where Inception's concept sounds way bigger than how they execute it on screen. You have a movie that's all about the potential of dreams, but
just about some rocks.
But you have a chase scene in the snow. It's like, you can do anything. So when it comes to the Infinity Stones having all this power, like snow, the depiction of the power of the Infinity Stones, I thought was lacking.
There were a few things that have. So let's talk about this for a second. Like, I actually despised the way they were doing like the reality stone, where it was like, oh, here's how things were. It's gonna have like this Lucasfilm wipe to show.
Why didn't you like that?
I just thought it was stupid. Like,
that's the one that kind of worked them. It just made the most sense.
The one where I was like, what is happening right now? Like when the Guardians were attacking him and he was like, he turned what's Bug Girl or whatever her name is to like rubber.
Mantis.
Yeah, and turned Drax to stone. I thought they were dead there. I was like, holy fuck.
Right. But see, that's what I thought was lacking. It's like the bubbles. I was like, that's what you come up with?
Yeah.
The bubbles? I was like, that glove, even without all 6 stones, you're supposed to literally just do all kinds of crazy shit. So it's weird that the best I've seen the Infinity Stones work is like when I saw anytime Doctor Strange had like the Infinity Stone in Doctor Strange movie was more effective than the Infinity Stones in this movie, with the exception of the moon. And then when he has all 6, there's that powerful moment. But
we could nitpick a lot of stuff, and
that's all I got.
My biggest nitpick is with Doctor Strange having the Time Stone, the Eye of Agamotto, and not using it to defeat Thanos. You know what I'm saying? Like in the whole sequence where they're trying to take his glove off of him, and they don't do it. Why doesn't he just turn back time to, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. That
basically do what he did with Dormammu.
That or what Thanos did with Vision in the end. Like the thing that you were trying to do didn't work, so just go back.
Couldn't Thanos do something that's equally effective, just not with time?
I don't know.
Like bend the reality.
I don't know, but even having those two things compete with each other.
I think when it comes to nitpicks, I think that's the only issue I have. And that gap in time that I brought up before, I don't even fault the movie for that, because I think, again, we're talking about something that's never been attempted before. So I'm more forgiving of that, because I think that's just something you have to sacrifice in this kind of movie.
Of course, yeah.
And it might even play better the second time I watch it.
I mean, it's a MacGuffin. I mean, it's just a reason for these people to,
for sure,
square off.
For sure,
but it is something that I did think about, because I was the out. Of course, I think was strange, as him saying that there's only one chance at 14 million something. So you're like, okay, so he's basically telling the audience like everything you're questioning about, I've already got it. I've already figured it out. I ran through the numbers, did the Moneyball sabermetrics shit. So I'm not doing that.
Shout out to Billy B.
Yeah, I'm just going to do this thing, and you'll see it in Part 4 of Avengers.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. I mean, that seems to be what's going on here, is that he's seen this play out and he knows. The one The one payoff I kind of wish they would have done. I mean, I get why they didn't do it, but when Tony Stark got stabbed in that scene on
Yes.
Titan, I was like, "Holy fuck!" I mean, I heard like an audible gasp in the audience, and he was obviously the only main Avenger that was under the most threat
peril,
of dying,
yeah.
right then and there. The third act of the movie, one of the reasons why the Wakanda scene is one of my least favorite is because it's the first fight scene that I saw where I really couldn't tell what was going on. It felt more like Avengers 1. And it was also at the
You
point.
think that about Avengers 1?
Yeah.
The Battle of New York?
To a certain extent, there's just like a bunch of stuff going on. Bunch of people fighting some bug things. Anyways,
I think it's communicated pretty well, though.
I mean, it's communicated that a bunch of shits. Yeah.
No, I mean, like visually, like the camera following along from Avenger to Avenger. I
Yeah.
think it.
That's what happens with movies. If camera follows characters around.
That's a film snob thing. He was being
No,
he's explained to you.
movies communicate scenes better than other movies, and I'm saying that Avengers, I
Right.
thought, communicated it well.
That's fine. So the only other thing that the Wakanda scene works against, or the reason I'm not totally on board with the Wakanda battle is because this is just me, but at that point I was so like, well, fuck, they're fucked. They're just so done. It was cool to see them like defeat Proxima Midnight and stuff like that, but I was just so defeated by everything else that I had seen that I just knew that shit was about to go down. When Thanos finally popped down on Earth, though, where did you think the movie was going to go?
God. I
Did you have any hope then and there?
no. I think that
Especially because everybody that was down on Earth, like, I just don't think they could have ever
because
stood a chance.
there's no
Besides
match
Thor.
for it.
Besides Thor.
There's no because most of them are just kind of humans that are strong,
Right.
with the exception of Scarlet Witch. She's dope.
Which, by the way, Scarlet Witch in this movie, of all the characters that I think this movie did so much for, I thought she was incredible in the film.
Thanos had already taken the time stone from Doctor Strange, and then when he goes to Earth, nobody there is more of a match for Thanos in that sense. So I was
Thor. Thor is the only one.
Yes. Okay, yeah, you're right. Thor.
Thor was the most Superman in that moment.
Yeah, you're
in time.
right. But
Why is he the last to show up?
because it just took him the time to get the Stormbreaker together.
No, I mean, I don't mean to the battle. I mean when Thanos is when they're separated from the
I don't
battlefield.
know.
Why is he the last? Why didn't he get his ass over there? Like if he's the one.
I don't
that you
know.
need.
Well, because of the movie, it needed some time.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Like
No,
if I'm Steve Rogers, I'm giving it a nice old man lecture about punctuality a little bit when you have.
One thing I want to
The crude acts.
give the Russo some praise on is there were times in this movie where even though it was their movie, there were pretty interesting shots or scenes that felt like they were taken specifically out of the individual films. Like there were times in Wakanda that felt like I was watching Ryan Coogler's.
Oh yeah.
And specifically for Thor, when he comes down to Earth and jumps up in the air with Stormbreaker and lightning is going off, felt like I was watching Taika Waititi's Ragnarok.
Could use
which I
more
think is really neat.
Winter
Was it
Soldier.
Guardians movie at
Guardians, of
times
course.
too.
Definitely needed more Winter Soldier vibe, which
Yeah.
I know you would have loved.
I'll tell you, because I was thinking about that too. The Russos have such a specific way of shooting these Marvel films, a lot of shaky cam type of stuff, especially that fight scene between Black Panther and Winter Soldier on the rooftop in Civil War. I thought was really badass. I got that in that New York fight scene.
Yeah.
Right. So like even in the park when they're fighting old dude with the big axe. Anyways.
I want to give the Russo brothers credit for doing something that's never been done before twice, and probably making the two best Avengers movies out of the 4, quote unquote,
Yeah.
that exist.
Avengers 2.5. and then 3.
They literally made a movie that not only just doesn't exist, except for this example, and I think that it for the most part just surpassed all expectations. I mean, I just thought it was amazing how, from what I knew, the film consciousness, nobody was questioning, what if this movie is terrible? I never heard anybody ask that question. It was like everyone I was involved with, we all just assumed it was going to be great. And I give the Russos a lot of credit because I think we just had a lot of faith.
Let's talk about this ending. I know we've dabbled in it, but I want to know your all's experience of like actually seeing it all play out.
Yeah.
Because and then we'll wrap up. But the snapping of the fingers, I didn't know what was going to happen after that. I didn't know if just everything was done. There was that really interesting shot, which I've a very artistic shot of Thanos being in this water world looking place, seeing Gamora, and then
sort of a gladiator type thing, right? Just going back to his home, his fields,
and then appearing back on Earth. I was like, "What the hell is this about? Why is he still there? What's going to happen? Nothing is happening." And then we start to see everything kind of go away piece by piece. I think for me, Tom Holland going away was the one that kind of got me the most. And shout out to Tom Holland. I know he's a big listener of Sight and Sound, but I thought he did a great job.
It was good
in this film.
Well, you're not used to seeing heroes express
emotion,
anguish,
emotion. I was gonna say weakness in that way because it's like there's always some measure of control they're supposed to project, even when like Tony Stark and Steve Rogers are beating the shit out of each other.
Yeah,
there's some machismo that they're like that's their weapon of choice. It's like Reservoir Dogs, like they're not pointing guns at each other, they're like pointing their dicks at each other.
Yeah,
like first one to blink. And so maybe it's because he's a teenager, he's a younger character, but it's like I have a harder time thinking that you're gonna see, you're not gonna see the Winter Soldier express that like, oh shit, this is the end in that way.
He's got that innocence about him, right? It's just like
and they drag it out certainly longer. Once you get with Black Panther, where it's like, oh, you're watching a kid who like that's the mini arc in the film that he was like told to like, you're not, this is too much for you to
stay
handle.
Back,
and he decided to come, and which it wouldn't have mattered anyway, I guess. I don't
Poor
know.
Tony Stark always feeling like things are his fault, which
setting him up
for
a hero's death, I guess.
For sure.
I was thinking about his nightmares in Age of Ultron, where he sees all of his friends around him dying.
Well, I mean, I just thought that scene was so powerful. Again, because I never would have imagined that was what was going to happen. I mean, I could picture a world where a lot of people die, especially unexpected people. And I like this idea that we don't know how they're going. It does pose an interesting question that we, the three of us here, know that they have to come back. And I'm interested, racking my brain, thinking like, how in the hell are they going?
Well, I mean, they don't have to come back to fight Thanos.
Of course,
you know what I mean. Like,
it's probably better for the movie if they don't.
I was gonna say, I'm still questioning how they defeat Thanos, even with Captain Marvel's help, without all of these really powerful, like Scarlet Witch. So, I mean, they might just all pop up at the end.
Do we have theories?
I don't have theories.
I know what I'd like to see.
Who's that?
I'd like to see Thanos killed like in the first 15 minutes.
Oh,
I like the idea that
you're talking about going full Snoke.
I just like the idea that he's done. Like he's accomplished what he wanted to accomplish, and he no longer has the desire for this bullshit.
So the movie is more about bringing people back as opposed
than it
to
is like
chasing Thanos.
What's interesting about that, I don't know if I would like it necessarily, but what's interesting about that is because we have that final somber moment, and I haven't decided yet if Thanos is sad because he regrets his actions or if he's just mourning Gamora in that moment. But automatically I thought about...
Or that he doesn't have purpose anymore because he accomplished what he was trying to accomplish.
Okay, so there you go. Even with that, it makes me wonder, how is Thanos going to be an effective villain if we know that already in the fourth movie? Because it's like, the only reason why Thanos can continue being evil, per se, is if he decides that he needs... Like, if there's some way, and I don't know if this is how the laws of this work, but if he could sacrifice more heroes to bring Gamora back, that way he did have that one person he loved back in his life, that would make Thanos continue to be evil, continue to be a baddie. Otherwise, we have all these questions, and it's like, how do you get bigger in the next movie? So the only thing I know when it comes to predictions and what I know I'm gonna see is Captain Marvel kick some ass, maybe Adam Warlock.
Yeah, I subscribe to the Adam Warlock
and
theory myself,
and I can't wait to see all that. Ronan, so Hawkeye will come back. I think Ant-Man has to come back, and I think we're going to do a lot of time traveling, because we saw all those behind the scenes photos. So I think we're gonna see. I think it's gonna look very similar to the nightmare sequences in Age of Ultron, where we see Cap back in the 40s dancing with Peggy, and we see Thor and Heimdall. I think we're gonna see a lot of our Avengers, living or dying, traveling through time for some reason, and I think that's going to be interesting visually.
I like the idea too of if this was a heist movie for Thanos to get the Infinity Stones, that it could be, some sort of movie where they're trying to get the Infinity Stones back from him if they need them to accomplish that. But it's interesting. I think it posed a lot of good questions. I like the idea of this being the Empire Strikes Back, if you will, where you just leave feeling like, fuck, like, where do we even go from here?
What did you?
I like the idea of like, do they have the rights to the scrolls? Is that or they're going to be in Marvel, right?
Yeah,
Marvel.
Skrull and Kree.
See, I like the idea of them bringing back the heroes and that setting up, a next sort of major arc where like one of them is they don't actually bring them back, but a Skrull takes the place. I would love to see one of these heroes in like 3 solo movies that has actually been a Skrull the whole time.
You and John Schnepp. John Schnepp has been talking about that a lot.
But
Secret Wars. Yeah.
You're throwing names out. He doesn't.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, what the fuck, Secret Wars?
Were you John Schnepp? Are you a First Avenger fan? How did you think it was cool that Red Skull came back?
Never saw it.
I mean, yeah, but like, would it have affected the movie if it had just been something else? No, not really.
It was kind of a throwaway. Like,
it was nice. I mean, I thought it was like, cool.
It was like super fan service. It was acknowledging that people were wondering his whereabouts. I thought it would have been sick if he came back to Earth with Thanos. I would have loved to have seen a moment where Cap saw Red Skull again.
Yeah.
I would have freaked out.
I think your wish might come true for the sole fact that with all of his Black Order gone, that he might have to be recruiting some new people.
I would have lost my mind if I saw Cap see Red Skull again.
That would actually be an interesting way to add more threat to the next film, as if Thanos himself went back through time to.
I would have also loved a scene where like modern day Hydra saw that icon. Like, imagine what it would be like if the First Order saw like Vader resurrected.
Yeah,
like something like that. I think would have been tremendous. But anyway, I was disappointed in that, but I was really, really excited about that.
But you were only disappointed once he shows up on screen. Like, it wasn't something you were expecting.
No, I didn't expect it at all. So
it's hard to blame him. It's something you thought was so cool in the moment that your mind then races on what they could do further.
I'm not. Those aren't points against the movie. It was just like, I would have loved if that happened, but it didn't matter that it didn't.
Last thing I have thoughts on. Basically, the people left standing are the original Avengers plus Rocket, which was strange to me. But do you like that it seems like this next movie is going to just be throwing it back to the original OG crew?
So my take on that is,
is it boring?
I think every great ending, whether it's a series finale or season finale or whatever, every great ending reminds you of the beginning, or references the beginning, or pays homage to the beginning. So I think that going back to that core first Avengers group is essential. And it also means that there has to be a passing of the torch moment where the core Avengers bring back all of these new characters. And that's when I think we will see Iron Man leave, Captain America leave, and Phase 4 will be all about the new crew.
Fantastic
out with the
Four.
old and with the new. Fantastic Four will get brought in eventually. X-Men will get brought in eventually. And it's passing of the baton.
I mean, there's a practical reason, right? Like, these actors, they're getting older, more expensive.
They looked older in this movie.
Yeah, if especially if you were going back and like sort of celebrating the 10 years and starting with like Iron Man 2008, you're like, you notice, which is cool. It's different from comic books. The comic book thing to do would be you kill off the original Avengers and you introduce a whole new series, the new Avengers or whatever. That's not satisfying in a film, though, where you have attachments to these actors playing that specific part.
Especially with what they've accomplished so far.
And there probably are going to be some people, I mean, they might be very rare, but certainly a lot of people that maybe skip Doctor Strange or skip one movie or two or what have you, that, when they're going to buy the box set this Avengers series will be like, the Black Panther trilogy that we're going to expect. Right. So to do a switcheroo with the last one, with the last part of the Avengers series, and have Spider-Man leading the crew, I think as a comic book fan, that's really interesting. But as a movie fan, I think you would feel cheated if you didn't get the final moments, this friendship between Stark and Rogers. You have to have it, I think.
I think the main crew has to have some kind of Logan moment in the next movie. Like
where you feel like
maybe not a death necessarily, but it has to be, you have to have a moment
for sure
for a proper departure.
And I can't wait until Hugh Jackman comes.
Keep waiting.
I was gonna say, yeah, good luck with that.
What is it? What's more likely, Hugh Jackman in Deadpool 2, or I'm sorry,
Hugh Jackman in Deadpool 2?
Yeah,
whatever
absolutely.
you're about to say, but
I agree
it's
with
not
that.
gonna happen. But actually, Hugh Jackman as Hugh Jackman in Deadpool 2 would be actually.
Here's a question: is this the peak, or the next Avengers? Do you think that's the peak for these films? You don't think so, even with mainstream audiences? Because I wonder about that. I wonder if there are people who are like, once I see the last of Chris Evans as Steve Rogers or Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark.
I thought you meant this movie.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, this series, when they resolve the storyline, do you see people saying, like, start checking out a little bit more? Like, is this the highest? You don't think so?
I think personally, I think that whatever comes post Avengers 4, after we get through, I think Captain Marvel is going to have some buzz around it. Obviously Black Panther and Spider-Man and this and that. But I think once they start introducing new properties, or not new properties, but new things that people aren't as familiar with. I mean, I'm talking digging deep. I'm talking
that had nothing to do with this entire first 10 years.
I think that is going to be a very big test for people, because I mean, you're asking people to be aware of things that they just have. I mean, Iron Man's one thing, right? I mean, fucking Black Sabbath wrote a song. At least you could have that in the back of your mind.
Sure.
But I mean, they're talking about things that Captain Marvel is a perfect example. How I saw people leaving that theater just being like, I don't know what that is.
They'll learn.
They'll learn.
I mean, they will. I mean,
they'll learn
this entire time.
They'll learn, but especially with what's going on with Star Wars right now, I think there has to be, like with every great sports team that's just dominant for a decade or whatever, there has to be a downturn at some point. And that might be good for Marvel, for something like that to happen. To hit a hard reset. But then again, they also have a whole abundance of new people with this Fox deal.
If you ask me the question, is it possible? Sure it is. If you ask me, do you see it? I would say no, because we have all of these Fox characters in the next,
that's the
years.
ace in the hole, or the X.
Do you think it would be better for the content itself, though, if there was some sort of lull where it wasn't constantly having 2 to 3 movies a year coming out to allow people to miss the universe?
I think
I personally, I would like things to feel smaller before getting bigger. Like, I don't like the idea of going more.
Well, we're going to Ant-Man and the Wasp in a couple months. That's good.
I don't like the idea of things getting more intergalactic. Like,
Ant-Man and the Wasp.
I know, I get that. I'm talking about other things like that. Like James Gunn going Deep Space Nine.
I think we're gonna get both. I mean, like I said,
we'll
get a Black Panther series. I don't think we'll see Black Panther in space, things like that. So
I think it'd be kind of cool. Black Panther in space.
I still think that. But anyway, you want to go around and do final thoughts?
Michael Dennison, you're the guest. We grade things here.
Oh crap! I've not done one of these in a while.
A, B, C, D, E, or F. There's an E in there.
E?
Yeah.
I would say it's hard because I unlike the other ones, I actually did want to rewatch this. Like, I want to go check it out later this week. I'm like,
I feel like it'd be a different experience.
Yeah, it's like there's just too much. It was like the meal was like I let stuff slide because I was just enjoying myself the whole time. Surprisingly, I don't know. Like, my initial thought is like B+.
Yeah.
Which is just it's a fun ride. I don't know if I'll revisit. Like, I do see myself in the future watching Homecoming more than I would watch this. Like, I feel like this is something I would be like, when I get in a Marvel mood, I would watch this at the culmination of like, just like binge watching. Whereas something like Homecoming or Black Panther, I think I could just randomly throw on.
It's a more digestible movie.
Yeah. So I think I probably rate that experience higher than something that's the culmination of a huge arc.
Right.
It's funny that you say you think it might have been too much, because I don't know if I ever thought it was like too much. I think there was an aspect of this movie that it was handled similarly to the Avengers. Whereas if you look at the Avengers, there's a massive task at hand bringing all these franchises together. You have a very basic to the core storyline to do that. You spend a lot of time just them on the helicarrier or whatever. I think this movie did that approach, which is sort of goes against what a lot of people were saying. So I think I think there is a very solid through line, and you're just watching a lot of characters, whereas I think the story moves properly. I think it's actually pretty streamlined. At least that's what I took from it anyway. And it's funny too, because it's so widespread. You're, watching Thor do Stormbreaker, and then you're watching them fight in New York. So there's a lot of that. I get it. But I'm very, very, very satisfied with this movie. It's everything that I thought I would feel about the movie, but they gave me a movie that I didn't expect at all. And I liked a lot of the character work, and it was okay that we didn't get a lot of certain characters, because again, it's different than any other thing that we've ever experienced. So I just give it I forgive a lot of sins that other movies may not get away with, but it was a fun time. I cannot wait to see it again. And I would give it right now, I'd give it like an A or A minus. I mean, I only had those few little concerns, and that's about it.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on board with both you guys. I think its biggest achievement is that it was an achievement. The fact that it had so many people and they pulled it off. It was fun. It was funny. Action packed. I did feel the length of it, but I don't necessarily think it dragged, which is a weird thing.
Right.
It did feel long. It was a long movie. Biggest negatives. I'm like you. I'm not holding it against it that certain people didn't get as much time as other people, but some of the people that were used, I feel like were underutilized even when they were there, especially people like Vision, people like Drax, and this and that. I'm feeling an A minus on it. It's just sort of what I feel more than anything. I enjoyed it. Had a fun time. I can't wait until next year.
That makes me so happy that I still got to be the most negative on here with the B plus. I didn't want to come in too high.
A good.
Yeah.
People get mad at like good grades. Like I gave Stranger Things 2 an A instead of an A plus, and people are like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?"
Oh, cool. Let me introduce, because I hate Stranger Things. Okay, there we go. There we go. We can just go.
Have you watched Mr. Robot?
No, I've never watched an episode.
Have you watched Atlanta?
I like Atlanta. Yeah, I really like Atlanta.
Mr. Robot season 1, incredible. Mr. Robot season 2, meh. Mr. Robot season 3, fucking amazing.
That always scares me off though with TV, like because the amount of investment. We were like, oh, this whole season was meh.
Do you like? I know you like David Fincher. Do you like Fight Club?
Yeah, Fight Club.
You'll like this show. I'll leave it at that.
All right, cool.
With those two things.
Groot as a character has the ability to enhance his growth, so it's weird that he didn't.
So do I.
It's weird that Groot didn't Hulk out.
I'm gonna give it a B now because you just reminded me. No, you remind me Groot is not the same person, because that's what the whole thing I thought was cool about him. You're like, it's a new Groot, and I'm like,
but like, a Groot has that ability. It makes no sense that he didn't.
We have 2 minutes or 3 hours. Michael Dennison, where can they find you online?
Oh yeah, Twitter's probably the easiest, at War Machine Horse, and there are links to all the various podcasts I do. And if you want to check out War Machine versus War Horse, it's on Apple Podcasts and I don't know, wherever you can find podcasts now. I don't keep up with what Google's doing or all that, but I'm sure
he's about to start a YouTube channel and post all those episodes there.
Oh man, that's too much work. That's just.
I hear you. Where can people find you? Right.
Like 1 hour into this, Michael was like, "Fuck, I'm here this late."
Yeah, my watch just died. I think it actually told me, yep, it's still got 10%. Yeah.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at WhatUpSnell. Guys, if you are not caught up on Legion, please
They
do
know.
so. Season 1 is on.
Legion is a great show. You should watch it.
Let me promote our stuff. Season 1 of Legion is on Hulu right now. You can catch up. We are recapping Legion every week, so come check that out as well.
You can find me online, Twitter and Instagram at JWilliams, J to the A to the Y to the E. It's the same for both. You can also find me every single Friday doing my music show. We have new merchandise coming up very, very soon. In fact, we have a very, 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 very special design that I am a few designs centered around this one thing that I'm very excited for. Special for the month of May. Special for a movie that might be coming out this May.
Tully. I hope it's a Tully shirt.
It's definitely not a Tully shirt.
This is entirely news to me.
No, it's not. You are aware of something.
I literally am.
All right. We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.